Hey everybody, Jesse Slaughter, Pursuit Podcast, and wow, the next guest you're just absolutely going to love. This is an American hero, Colonel George Bristol. Served over 38 years in the United States Marine Corps, most of those in special operations. He actually was a leader of the region during the Benghazi incident. He talks about that briefly in here, despite some of the classified information and non-disclosures that he has signed. In spite of all of that, the most rich, best stuff about this podcast that you're going to love is the story of his life as a leader, as a father, as a husband, and as a patriot. He does an amazing job. What you're going to love most is hopefully what I loved about this podcast is his optimism. He still believes in this country. He still believes we have a way to become and stay the greatest nation ever. Tune in, check it out, stand by.
69-foot pursuit. Stop! Sir, stop!
Colonel, welcome.
Yeah, good to be here, Jesse. Proud to be here.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you coming down. Drove all the way down here today?
Yeah, it's a good, nice drive though this morning. Not too much ice on the roads by Glacier, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. Hey, we got a place for you to stay if you decide you need to stay.
Okay.
So you're covered as far as all that
right,
goes.
I'll think about it.
You're good to go. Hey, so I am super excited about this interview. We met several years ago when you started doing combatives for the Great Falls Police Department.
Yep.
And then we invited you up to do it for us at the sheriff's office after I became sheriff. And during that time, our buddy Tom Holleran, he kind of introduced me to you. And what did he say? He said, what did he say about you one day to me? He goes, he's like the most famous person nobody knows about. Which I think is super funny.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
Well, that's Tom Holleran humor.
Yep, for sure.
So I know that a lot of people will know who you are, your background, where you come from, as far as that stuff when they see this and they tune in. But what I'm really interested in, I've done obviously my research and homework as far as everything. But what I really want to talk about is where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in New England, in Rhode Island.
Okay.
I had a pretty rough childhood. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And I was in some trouble when I was a kid because of that. And when I pretty good athlete, but you kind of, in a small town, I was kind of an outsider, and I wanted to get away as quick as I could. So 1975, I went to see all the military recruiters. A couple guys that I was doing, slave labor for to make some money were like, that's where you should go. And the Marine Corps was the only one out of the four that would take me. So I was happy to get it. And I went to boot camp. And I remember, I had a record. Right. So one of the recruiters, he said, when you go in, you have a waiver. I had no idea what, that meant. But he said, you have a waiver. And if somebody asks you a question about, what happened to you before, you just keep saying, I'm on an approved waiver from Headquarters Marine Corps. So when you go to boot camp at Parris Island, lonely place, but, I was fit and everything, and that was good. But you want to be invisible. You just want to be one guy and whatever we had, 40, 50, or 60 people in the platoon. So I remember about 2 weeks in, I was doing pretty well. And they called me one night. They call it free time, your last hour, but it's not free. You're just getting ready for the next day. So I walked in there, and that's the first time I ever saw a Marine officer. And he said, Bristol, we want to ask you some questions. The drill instructors were kind of on each side of me. And, when they have a lot of power over you, you realize after a while they're not quite as tough maybe as they seem. But so I just picked a spot on the wall, and I told the lieutenant, well, the private is on an approved waiver from Headquarters Marine Corps. And I just kept saying that over and over again. And I looked down and I could see that he had some things from my juvenile record, which the recruiter said, this will all be sealed, nothing, no one will ever see this. So I just kept saying the same thing, and he kind of put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Bristol, so far, you're doing all the things right. You maxed the physical fitness test. You have a high, they call it a GCT. It's just a test that you take, the ASVAB test. And he said, as long as you keep your nose clean, you found your home. And it meant a lot more to me than I thought it did. You know, my mom, I got 4 sisters, and, you know, I was doing a lot to help raise them. But I kind of had that feeling, you know, the Marine Corps, I mean, it's tough, but I decided, you know, I was going to give back to what it had given me. And I was pretty lucky, you know, I had a great run in the Marine Corps, 38 years. I did 8 and a little couple of months worth as an enlisted Marine, not a force recon guy. And I was a jock. You know, I played rugby, and I did judo at a pretty high level. And then I was an officer for 30 years, and I stayed till the absolute last day. And, you know, the last day I testified in Congress because I was one of the commanders in Benghazi. But what I think the military, law enforcement, you know, I think these are things that until you're inside of it, you don't really understand what it is.
Absolutely.
And for me, you know, I didn't realize then everybody's just coming back from Vietnam. You know, a lot of guys were like, oh, well, when I was in the Nam. And I realized later they had been like sitting in Saigon, you know, some of the younger ones. But I met a lot of great guys there. We have a great heritage, and I just kept going. You know, at first I thought I'm going to do 4 years and I'm going to be a professional fighter because I thought I was so tough. And but I just kept staying, and nobody was more surprised than me when I got picked up as an officer. You know, I had to kind of scramble through college. I'm no student for sure, but you know, then I think, you know, when I went into combat, you know, that made me realize that, you know, I was good at it. You know, like, and you know a lot about that. You know what I'm talking about. It's very easy to look at movies today, you know, and see some of the BS that goes on there. But you know, when you're in that environment, you know, you either thrive or you kind of perish, you know. And
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, you know, I think I was kind of born for that time, you know, particularly 9/11, and I was gone a lot, you know. I was gone a bunch, and you know, you name a bad place, I was just kind of like a magnet for it, you know. Somalia, that was really the first one. It was bad, you know, and it was really bad. And that's the first time I realized, you know, I thought, well, you know, you're working in special ops, you're invincible. The Somalis are tough. I mean, they're super tough.
Yeah.
You know, like people you see on the street, just, you know, they don't look too tough, but they are, you know, because they're surviving.
Absolutely.
And, you know, then I was in Bosnia for a long time. I saw what a real civil war can look like, and real ethnic hatred, you know, I mean, real ethnic hatred. I asked a Serbian guy one time, I said, well, you know, how can you tell, you know, what a Croatian is like? And he said, I can tell him by the smell. You know, that's what he said. I can tell him by the smell. And, you know, then, you know, when 9/11 went, everybody kind of started going, and, you know, we just kind of kept on going and going and going. And so my life kind of became Iraq and Afghanistan, and, you know, it was tough. It was tough on my wife and my kids. You know, I got a son and a daughter. I think my daughter, she kind of thought I was invincible. And at least at that time. Now when your kids grow up, you never know how stupid you are till your kids start telling you how stupid you are. But
every day.
But my son was, I mean, it really affected him, you
Yeah.
know, and he said, Dad, I kept thinking you're not going to come back. You know, I got banged up a little bit. I got, nicked up a little bit, more than a little bit. And, but, I kind of felt like me and the guys of my generation, we were kind of born for that war. Mm-hmm. And, what I really started looking at was, that enemy and getting that feeling. And, martial arts became something very different to me. And one of the things I'm, proud of is, I created the martial arts program for the Marine Corps. And it's kind of funny, when I think about it now. So I'd been going along and I'd been gone a lot. I was working, in some pretty sensitive stuff, and my wife and kids were about tired of it, and so I went to the Naval War College in like I think it was 1998. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to get off the track for a while. I'm going to do something easy. So I got a job in Hawaii. My kids were super happy. My son and daughter, both good swimmers. And so we went over there, and I was there for maybe the first 4 months, and it was really normal. I was just like a normal, like they said, Dad, you're coming home every night and all that. It was really great. And then one day I got the guy who was the 3-star general, who was a big Vietnam guy named Frank Labuti, just a guy I just admire so much even now. He said, hey, I need you to come upstairs. You're going to sit in on a meeting. And I said, yeah, okay. And we had a brand new commandant. He was the head of the Marine Corps. It's a pretty good thing. Big, tall guy, General Jones. So that's the first time I'd ever seen like a big screen, like a Zoom. Now it's all very commonplace. Jesse, that was not the norm back then.
Not the norm back then. Yeah.
So anyway, I got up there and I thought I was going to take notes. I thought that's what I was in there to do. I just made Lieutenant Colonel, and so General Jones, he gets on and he says, oh, hey, Colonel Bristol, you're a recon guy. My father was the 1st Recon Battalion commander. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, isn't that nice, 4-star, paying a little attention to one of the peons. So he started talking and he said, boy, you got a heck of a martial arts record. You've been in some stuff. And I was like, oh, yes, sir. And he said, what do you think about the Marine Corps today? He goes, do you think it's kind of soft? You don't want to respond to the commandant of the Marine Corps. Yeah, we're soft, sir. But so I just said, well, sir, we got a lot of different generations, and some have been into some things, some of them haven't. And he said, well, what would you say if I told you I'm thinking about creating a program that everybody's going to do and everybody's going to have to do? And like an idiot, I walked right into it. I said, oh, sir, that'd be great. You'd have my 100% support. I've been an instructor at several different things. And he said, yeah, I know you are. I know, because you're going to do it. And, and and I said, well, are we going to do it in Hawaii, sir? And he said, no, we're going to do it in Quantico, Virginia. And I said, oh, well, sir, we just got here. Like an idiot. Like I'm a lieutenant colonel talking to him. He must think, like, how did this guy ever make it, right? So anyway, I went to Quantico and
so that's the whole story right there. You just went to Quantico, it was done.
and I had one of those things at the beginning where there were some young guys over there that were kind of teaching the lieutenants at the basic school. They were, sergeants. I had been like that. I know what it's like to be a tough guy, and think. So, I showed up and they were kind of like, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm the guy who's running it. And they said, well, we got to kind of see what you can do, Colonel. So I took them upstairs, and they would tell you this. I took them upstairs one by one and just said, how do you want it? I'll give it to you any way you want it. And off we went. And the incredible thing, and I know you've experienced this, I know you have, is I think sometimes you expect everybody that's in professions like ours is going to be wanting to fight, really good at fighting. And that was not the case. We had a lot of guys and gals, and that they'd never felt that, and particularly in close. And so that was kind of my job. So I did that for a couple of years, and I'm proud of it in my own way. I'm not one to look back too much. you know, because General Jones, when I think about it, it was amazing, his timing, because, you know, that was 99. We did a test study in 2000, and then we were off to the races. And then, of course, you know, 9/11 went down, and I had already been doing some kind of specialized stuff, but we were kind of more ready. And Marines are tough guys, but there are tough guys in all the services, and you know, to this day, you know, I still like the fact, you know, that we formed something really good. The Army came kind of right after us, you know, and said they're going to do theirs, and I thought that was great. I just will tell you one funny thing about it, though. You know, sometimes you think you're cooler than you are. So last year, I do some work still from Special Operations Command, and I was at 29 Palms, California, which is not the nicest place that you'll ever go. And I was out doing pull-ups, and you know, I like to. I'm still in pretty good shape. I'm 65, but I'm in pretty good shape. And I was out doing pull-ups, and I was coming across the parking lot to get in my rental car, you know, and I can't see anything without my glasses now. You know, I say that as a guy that was a sniper for a while when he was enlisted, but I can't see much without my glasses, and I had them in the car. But I was squinting, and I saw the Marine Martial Arts one mind any weapon symbol. So I said, no, I'm just going to go inside just to see what it was. It was a crappy building, like most of those buildings are. So I went in, and he's a retired sergeant major. He's a great guy. And he was like, oh, my God, it's Colonel Bristol. Oh, my God. So him and a couple older guys, they came up, and, you know, they were just telling me how wonderful I am. And, of course, I was sucking it all right up. But so I said, hey, guys, I got to go. You know, I had to go to a meeting. And I'm walking out of there, and I got no glasses on. And there was like a off-center step. And I'm coming out of there, you know, the manhunter and the great martial arts guy.
All pumped up on yourself, right?
So I come down hard like that, and I just barely saved myself from breaking all my teeth. So anyway, I got up. These two gunnery sergeants were like, sir, are you okay? I go, yeah, I'm all right. I said, that's what happens when you get old. Well, there were two young Marines walking out of the bathroom. And so I was kind of walking out, but I heard them really distinctly. They said, who is that old? Started with an F. He goes, he doesn't deserve to be in here. Well, the two gunnies went wild. You know, they said, do you know who this is? He'll kill you with a knife and all this. So the moral of that story is, I mean, Jesse, you still look good. So I'm not, but you know, somebody will challenge you. And, you know, my challenge was that step. And I'm thinking, I can't even beat up a step, right? So anyway, but yeah, I had a good run, and
just God's way of keeping you humble.
Yeah,
you know, he's bumping you up, and he's like, okay, but not that bad.
Yeah, you know, so I saw somewhere in the Bible it said, "Men make their plans, and then God laughs."
Yep,
you know, and that's
exactly.
a great way of looking at it.
Exactly.
So he, you know, so yeah, I had a really good run in the Marine Corps. You know, it was good.
So let's go back real quick.
Yeah.
So you broke the occasional law or two.
Yes.
As a young man.
More than a couple. Yeah.
Which, you know, I've often commented, I think our world is becoming too litigious, and too, you know, there's actually something to young men. I mean, as long as it's not something weird, like some weird sexual thing or murder or some goofy thing, young men act out.
Yeah.
It's what they do, especially if they don't have good parental figures or they have issues. I mean, if they have any issue at all, they're going to act out. And I mean, I think young women do too. I don't want to leave them out. Young people. I find that they make the best cops and soldiers ever.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Because, I mean, one of the questions, I mean, and I always I'm not in on the interview process. It's not my job as the sheriff, but I always want to ask people, it's like, have you ever had your nose broke before?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, have you ever been punched so hard you see stars for a quick sec? Because until you think you know the world until that happens.
That's exactly right.
Then everything changes at that moment.
That's exactly right.
And we used to street fight for fun when I was a kid.
That's right.
It was a game. It was a sport.
But Jesse, back, you know, nowadays, I'll just tell you something. One of my wife's friends, she was telling me, my son is having a play date with his friend. And I said, what? And she said, a play date. And I thought to myself, if there's a more stupid thing than two boys having a play date, I don't want to criticize the girls if that's what they want to say. But you're right. And, the other thing is there was a time, like my mom used to lock me outside every day. She goes, don't be coming in here with those dirty feet. And I said, well, what if I have to go to the bathroom? And she would point. She goes, that's what those trees are for back there. And she had like a little roll hanging on one of the branches. But today, it's just different, and it's sad. It's sad that it's different, and unfortunately, it's a lot of it's necessary now. So, but I agree with you.
So talk to me. How old were you when you got in your first fight?
I was probably about 8.
Do you remember?
Yeah. So
real fight. Where like it's too mad. It's over anger.
Yeah. So I'd gotten in one bad, and then the next day I had lazy eye when I was a kid, so I had an eye patch on. So I think in the first 5 days of school, I was in like 5 fights, and I told my mother, I'm going to come home and join the circus. That's what I'm going to do. So the thing that saved me, I'll tell you, and God has a way of stepping in. So the next day, the gym teacher came in. And in those days, they had that President's Council for Physical Fitness thing.
Oh, yeah.
And he strung this pull-up bar. He strings this pull-up bar across one of the things, and all the kids were calling me, they were calling me, retard and freak and all that, because I had an eye patch on. And so I remember we all lined up in alphabetical order. I was number 9. I still remember that. I'd never done a pull-up ever. And so I watched the first 8 kids. None of them could get one. And on raw fear, I did 9 pull-ups. And I dropped off, and, the guy was just kind of pushing us all along. So then at the end, I remember he was looking at his list, and he said, Bristol, who's Bristol? So I came walking up, and all these people go, freak, he's a freak. And he said, Bristol, shake my hand. You're the strongest person in the class. So I shook hands. He goes, no, Bristol, don't shake it slow and soft. Shake it hard. And he said, your word is your bond, and your handshake is your signature. So up until then, I had been telling my mom, I don't want to be in school. I don't want any part of it.
Right.
But I came home that night, and I said, if my uncle would put a pull-up bar up there, I'll do those pull-ups. And and those are the kind of things that save you. But, violence, playground violence it's not really violence. It's finding your place in the circle. Absolutely. And holding your place in the circle. That's what I believe.
I'll never forget. I'd been in a few fights, but I hadn't really been tested by anyone. And I'll never forget, this is my upbringing with my father. I was going to the school bus, and this kid, and he was like 2 grades older than me, he would grab my ears and he would jerk on them really hard just to make me mad. Yep. So I came home one day and I was upset. And I told my dad, and he's just like, okay, we'll fix it. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, turn around and break his nose.
Yeah, that's a good dad right there.
And I said, but I'm going to get in trouble. And he's like, don't worry about it.
Yep.
He's like, if you get kicked off the bus, kicked out of school, I'll take you to school. He goes, if you get kicked out of school, he goes, we'll go have ice cream. And I'm like, what? So, totally blew my mind, because he wasn't the sheriff yet, but he was a deputy sheriff. Yep. You don't do that, right?
Yep.
And I'm thinking your whole world of right versus wrong. So next day I got on the bus, and I'll never forget the anxiety I had. I had just terrible anxiety because I couldn't let my dad down.
Sure.
So I had to do what I had to do.
Yeah, man.
And I turned around and I throttled that kid, and blood came out of his nose. And I'll never forget, her name was Mrs. Terpstra, and she was our bus driver, and she was mean. Yep. And she just looked up in the window and smiled, and we kept on driving.
Yeah,
not another word was said.
You know what? You gotta love that. You gotta love that.
That was that's what I grew up. That's how we grew up. We got in fights on school, and they'd get mad. We'd be in a like total Donnybrook getting after it. But during that, we said a couple of curse words. So I had to go sit in the principal's office for like 3 days and write, I will not swear in school till my hand was tired. Yep. And that was my penance. Yep. And I was done. I was like, get back to class.
Yep. My son, Sam, who's a great guy. He's a computer programmer. He's just a fantastic guy. And he's a great martial arts guy. He's been doing it with somebody for a long time. But he, when I was away, one of my 8 million tours, he got in the middle of 2 guys were fighting, and he got in the middle of it, and he broke it up. So they brought them all down to the principal, and they said, we're going to suspend all 3 of you. And so my son said, oh yeah, that's fine. And he said, what do you mean that's fine? And he said, well, my dad told me as long as I'm defending the underdog, he'll back me right down the line. And if he had stopped there, it would have been perfect. But of course, he said, my dad also told me that if I ever picked on somebody, he would beat the SH out of me himself. So yeah, but those are the lessons you learn. And you know, when you, I will say this, and not too, you know, derogatory, because I do see a lot of kids. There's a lot of really soft kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, it makes me sad because, you know, what kids learn by falling down, you know, they get up. And a lot of times, if parents rush to them and tell them, oh, that's what makes them cry.
Absolutely.
You know, most of the time they just get up.
You're so spot on. The fear that they see their parents have is what scares them into the emotion.
Yep. My mom, you know, she was super tough. She raised the 5 of us, and I came home. I had one of my eyelids had a kind of a slice in the top, and I was trying to get out of going to school. You know, I said, oh, it's really, really hurts. So she like pulled it to the side, and I don't mean this as a knock against Chinese, but it was kind of like what you do when you make Chinese. She taped it, and I went to school like that, and she's like, you'll be all right when you get home. That's what her whole thing was. It'll all solve itself when you come
But
home.
it does, though.
It does. Yeah,
it does solve itself.
No, it's
like
fantastic.
people worry about it. So were you 18 when you went into the Marine Corps?
I signed up when I was 17. I was
Okay.
Yep.
So you were early enlist.
Yeah, I did, and then I went. You know, I went, and I got to just say one more thing about the Marine Corps, because there'll be some Marines. There'll
a lot
be
of stuff about the Marine Corps.
There'll be some Marines listening. So anyway, you go to boot camp. You know, they shave your head. You smell really bad, and you know you don't really know what's going on. But it was July 4th, and so we were in our little. You know, we were in Paris, it's just super hot. It was summer. And so they haul us all outside. You know, you just look horrible, and you smell horrible, and, you know, you're just low on the totem pole. So anyway, this Marine officer comes out. He's got dress blues on, and he's saying, you know, today, you know, is July 4th, and your parents are proud of you. Your brothers and sisters are proud of you. You know, your friends are proud of you. And the drill instructors just, you know, they sit there, their ramrods straight, and then we got done. He kind of walked away, you know, to do whatever he's doing, the officer. They pull us back inside, and the drill instructor got all of us up there, and he said, let me tell you what's really going on. Your brother has already taken your room. They're throwing all your stuff. There was with a few little different words there.
Oh, yeah.
He's taking all your stuff, and it's outside and getting wet. He said, your girlfriend is in your car with your best friend in the back seat type thing. And they said, and what are you? You're nothing. You're mine. You're all mine. But you know, you grow up like that. And I you know, I think that a little bit of that, you know, with some kids today, you know,
absolutely
would be great.
But the thing about it, here's what's sad about soft kids. They're gonna get hard one way or the other.
Yeah, they are.
And it's either gonna happen through their demise, or they're gonna actually face some actual resiliency, which is gonna create them to be a strong man.
You're right.
But it's going to happen one way or the other.
It is.
But it's sad because most kids, it's going to be their demise.
Yep. I think, you know, I spent one of my dogs and we did, I think 6 times down on the border, you know, in Arizona. And, you know, the toughest kids I know are those ranch kids. They're just super tough.
Yeah.
You know, you watch like a 5-year-old kid, he's out there doing it. He falls off a horse. He falls on his head. He kind of shakes his head, dusts his cowboy hat on, puts it right back on and goes. And, you know, I just think that's you're absolutely right, because someday something's going to come at you that's not that friendly,
absolutely,
or going to be very hard for you to do. And you know, it's so easy to quit, right? It's, you know, it's so easy. As a battalion commander, you know, in the recon battalion, you don't have to worry about that too much. But I had this thing called a quit jar, and so if anybody dropped out of a run, anybody, you know, went to a school and failed, they would write their name in like huge letters, and I'd put it in the quit jar, and it would be right outside my office. And the only way they could get it out of the quit jar was to go back and do what they were doing. But, you know, and the other thing, Jesse, I would say the technology is fantastic stuff. It's all fantastic. We're dealing with stuff here right now, and it's great. But, you know, sometimes 6-year-old kids don't need iPhone 27, you know, and their own sound system. And when I see a lot of that in, you know, some of the stuff I do, and you know what that is, these kids, they get very adept with that phone when really they should get adept doing push-ups and being polite and shoveling snow. We got plenty of snow in Montana.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
They can shovel it. They don't need a snow blower. They can shovel it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that for sure.
No, it's a real thing. And I look at your career and I look at the things that you accomplished and stuff. And I mean, I realize you don't want to go into it with your childhood, and I respect that. But, you know, that childhood trauma a little bit, having that tough upbringing, you can't make it through those things unless you've had that adversity young. You can't.
It's right. You know, and you know, I used to wonder, you know, why me? Like I would think about it. But, you know, one of the things, and I would offer this, you know, up just as, you know, it's happened to a lot of kids. I remember, you know, I was getting a pretty good pounding from somebody, you know, and I remember I just told my mom. She said, I think I was 7, and I said, yeah, I'm not going to cry anymore. I'm just not going to cry.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of roll up in a ball, and then, you know, I got in trouble. I did get in trouble. I was doing some things, trying to make some money, and not always the right way. And
So you had a side hustle, is what you're telling me.
a little bit. And you know, now I look back, you know, particularly, you know, like I said, I got 4 sisters, and you know, I think a couple of them thought, like, my brother never smiles, my brother's not happy. I mean, I think I was busy, you know.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you one because they can't do this anymore. So one winter, my mom was telling me, and I wasn't that long out of a juvenile detention facility, and I remember my mom said, you're gonna have to quit school because we need the money. They're gonna shut our heat off. They can't do that anymore. But
Right.
so I was like, Mom, I can't, you know, look at me. I'm like a athlete. I'm doing my thing. She goes, we got to get the money. So I was working for this New England farmer, different afternoons. And I mean, all I remember in New England was crappy soil. All I did was pick rocks out of there. We were building this rock wall. That's what they do in New England. And I came down. I said, can I go to work for you full time? He said, what's the matter? And I said, well, they're going to shut our heat off. I got to get some money. He got me in this old Ford. Like, he just said, come on with me. It was right in the middle of it. I just went in. There was a bank that was like smaller than where we are right now. He came out and he had $500, and he said, take this. And I said, you know, I can't pay you back for this. And he said, you're a good investment. That's what he told me. That's all he said. And so
You're a good investment.
Yep. And so when I went in the Marine Corps, that was the first thing I did was, you know, they said you can take out X amount of money. And I took it. I took it and I sent it to him. And
So how old were you when this happened?
I think I was 14. Yeah. And it just gave me this incredible thing. The other thing he did, I was wrestling, and I asked him, I was having trouble cutting weight. I was wrestling, and I was having some trouble cutting weight, and it just, I was just looking, and I wanted to be a wrestler. I wanted to do all this stuff. And I said, if I can just have a couple of days off. And he was super mad. He didn't say anything. He's just one of these real big, burly, kind of quiet guys. So he said, go ahead. Yeah, take it off. And so we were doing just stuff within our team at the time. And I was wrestling a guy that was a lot older than me. And I remember I put him in a cradle and I pinned him. And I looked up, and there he was. There was this guy, Mr. Welsh, Frank Welsh. He's just standing there, and he just like made a fist and pumped it. So, and then he left. So the next day I came, feeling pretty good about myself. And I said, Mr. Welsh, I really appreciate that. And he goes, yeah, you're going to make up the time right now.
That's it. We're done talking about it.
Exactly. Yeah. He didn't care. He didn't care about anything. But
he cared. He cared deeply.
So so those kind of things. And, when you see things happening, when you see, like right now, I'm definitely a workaholic. I mean, I know that about myself. But last year, a good friend of mine, we were in Recon Battalion together, and he's a great guy, Joe Coco. He's been in Whitefish for a lot of years. When we did, I let my wife decide. I had no credibility with her and the kids because I had been gone so much. But she decided she wanted to come out here, and so we did. So he was an Eagle Scout. You know, as you know, the Boy Scouts kind of go in a little different direction in some ways. So, but there's an organization called Trail Life, and it's a lot of former Scout members that are Scout leaders, and it's about teaching boys how to be a man.
Yeah.
And so Joe said, you helped me a lot. He used to work for me, and now I'm working for him. So I'll just tell you one super cool thing that you can't manufacture this any other way but by doing it. So we got a bunch of young boys, really 11 through 17. And so both Joe and I were big believers in camping out in the winter in the snow cave, because we learned how to do that in the Marine Corps. And if you can do that, you can do almost anything. So a lot of these boys, they got about as much body fat as my finger right here. So anyway, there's this one kid, his name's Keaton Hunt, and I don't mind saying his name. He was, we were camping out one night outside of Whitefish, and it was 8 degrees, 8. And so the boys, it's pitch tents. Joe and I were trying to prove to the boys, you could stay out just on the ground, which is stupid, but we were out there sleeping. So this kid, his dad came out. We like the dads to come out. And his dad's a really hardworking guy. And he had a big farm show the next day in Kalispell. So I could hear Keaton going, Dad, you just stay, please just stay. We can sleep in the tent or we can go sleep in the truck. And, this guy's dad was it was killing him. It was just killing him. You don't want to leave, but you got to leave.
Right. So
I just told his dad, I said, go ahead, go. We got this. We got this. So he's sitting there. So then he turns to me, this little guy, and he said, Colonel Bristol, maybe I could sleep with you. I said, we're sleeping right over there. And he's a big snowbank. And then I said, you're going to go in that tent. You're going to go to sleep now. So then a kid that's older than him, a kid named Ewell Brown, really impressive kid, he came out and he said, Colonel Bristol, I'm the patrol leader. I got this. So they went inside and I could hear him talking inside. And then I just went and, froze my butt off for the rest of the night with Joe Coco and a doctor named Matt Bailey who we suckered into it. So the next morning, though, I got up early. I drink a ton of coffee anyway. And I started the fire and I was, it was about the same temperature, about 8 degrees. Out comes Keaton. He's kind of, and you remember Andy Griffith, Barney Fife?
Oh, yeah.
When he'd stretch out his little chicken chest and go, hey, Ange, me and Thelma Lou, But he comes up to me and he goes, Colonel Bristol, I'm not afraid anymore. And I said, really, you're not afraid? And he said, yeah, I went in there and Ewell talked to me and I fell right asleep. So what we do in our troop is we give each boy a nickname. Some of them are, none of them are offensive. All of them are kind of funny.
Right.
But I looked at him and I said, do you want to know what your nickname is? He goes, I've been waiting for a nickname, Colonel Bristol. I said, your nickname is Fearless. And he's one of our top kids. I mean, we have a lot of great kids in there.
Awesome.
And now he's kind of, kids will get scared of something and he'll go, you can do this, you can do this. And it's all, and that's one of the greatest things that, that you can do. Sometimes.
Absolutely.
And I know you got this feeling, sometimes you're working all day and you're like, how many check marks did I check off in my notebook today? Not too many.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're out there with those boys, when we're out there with them, we tell them, look, you're going to do this. You're going to do this. You can do this. And when they do it, we give them enough praise, but not too much.
Right.
And then the other thing is, we do some workouts that are, most of it is one guy carrying another one. Mm-hmm. I put him through a lot, Jess. I do. I'm the muscle. Joe is the brain. I'm the muscle in there. And when you watch these kids sometimes, they're just so skinny. They haven't had that testosterone burst yet, but they're coming. And what we feel like, maybe that's the future, right?
Absolutely. How explain to me how you go from your childhood upbringing, which is rough, and I hear that, a lot of that your mother's kind of your figure in your life.
Definitely.
How do you make the switch? What in your life made it so you could mentor?
Yeah.
Because mentoring young men is not easy.
No, it's not.
I mean, I have an 18-year-old son and I'm still trying to figure it out. How do you make the switch?
Yeah. I think for me, I was always looking for role models, and if you really want to know, my role models when I was a kid are all guys on the Westerns.
Okay.
I mean, Matt Dillon was certainly one of them. then there was a TV show, and these were all repeats. You know, they'd been on before I was born, 1957, and I used to like this show called Lawman, and it was this guy, Marshal Dan Troop, and he had been a Marine. I didn't know what a Marine was in those days, but I used to watch that, and he had this young deputy, and he was tough on the deputy. The guy's name was Peter Brown, really good actor, and I used to watch that show religiously. And then, when I went in the Marine Corps, you start working your way up, and I just had, very good leaders, tough guys, I kind of wanted to be like those guys, and then, as I got older, and it keeps going, I met a hunter in Africa when I was doing some stuff over there, and a guy named John Thornwood, who was a big influence on me, just about being responsible, and he made me realize, you go to Africa in those days, you could just shoot all day, and he said, you're going to shoot one. That's it. And he was a really great hunter, and then he became a game ranger. And I started looking at those guys, and you want to be those guys. So, for example, in the Marine Corps, we're not encouraged to get a mustache. We're just not. It's just not a Marine Corps thing. So the day after I retired, I grew this mustache for John Thornwood. He had one, and
Awesome.
He had already passed away by that time. But I thought, I'm going to leave something like that. I think when you mentor boys, you have to realize that maybe, I saw some kids that I recognized what was happening to them right away.
Right.
You can't push too hard. You can't. Then I recognized a lot of boys that were straining to be noticed. And you got to notice them a little bit, but not too much. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're fair, I tell you, my friend Joe Coco, he's one of the best men that I know. I think when he was a scoutmaster, he had about 25 to 27 Eagle Scouts, and that is not easy.
No.
That is not easy. And he treated them all just the same. And now, they're all very responsible young guys. But I think, I'm glad that people ask me that because, as I was growing up, I know now that I was looking for that.
Yeah.
The tough part for me, though, I will say, was I was gone so much, really from probably 2000 to really till I retired in 2013, and then I just kept on going as a contractor. I was gone all the time. My son and I now, we've had some really heart-to-heart stuff about what he missed and what I missed. And, fly fishing is kind of our thing. And,
that's awesome.
They just had it's our first grandchild. And he was kind of telling me one time, well, Dad, I don't want you to, this is before she was born, Dad, I don't want you to start giving her all your theories. And I said, Sam, I'm not going to walk in there reading like Mein Kampf or anything like that. But I told him, Sam, when that baby's born, you're going to understand me a lot more than you do.
Oh, yeah.
And that night, he called me a couple of times. His wife, Alexa, who's tough, man, she's tough. She, the baby had sat on the cord, and they were going to C-section. And I'm not telling any big tales out of school, but, I think like the walls come down between Sam and I, because now he realizes. Yeah. And I said, Sam, there's going to come a day. You look at this little girl named Alice. They named her after my mom, which I really appreciate. And I said, there's going to come a time when you're going to want to do something with that little girl, and you're not going to be able to because you're going to be working or you're going to be somewhere else. And I said, and I want you just for a second, you don't have to tell me I'm great or anything, but you're going to know what it feels like to be walking away. And that's a tough thing. But I think when I was a kid, I used to see this commercial all the time about big brothers, Yeah. And I used to kind of wonder, like, what would that be like if I had a big brother? I think sports are really good for you. But for me, I kind of found my own role models. And, this trail life troop at this point, I'm 65 and I really enjoy it. I enjoy watching them grow up. I mean, I give them a lot of crap. I do. I'll admit it.
You have to.
Yeah, you do. And they take it and they like it.
They do.
So that's the big
Well,
thing.
it's funny. Kids have this kind of innate sense, as long as you're not going over the line and being abusive, they have this sense like, if you're not teasing me, you don't like me. you know? And I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I really do.
I think boys, if you say you're an idiot, they love it because they're like, I'm in. You know, he's noticed me. You tell a girl she's an idiot, she melts, you know, and so you got to be careful.
Yeah, you have to know him.
But I'll tell you this, you know, some of the best mentorship I've had in the last couple of years, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention a really good family in Kalispell, the Paulsons, Jim Paulson and his wife Sonny. They're just fantastic people, and so Jim told me one time, he said, you know, I really want you to meet my granddaughter, Isabella. And, you know, I had no idea who he was talking about. And I said, why do you want her to meet me? He goes, I just wanted to meet you. He'd been in the hospital, and I think he was thinking, I want to make sure somebody's watching out while I'm rehabbing. I do. So I meet this girl, incredible, just an incredible little girl. So anyway, she was kind of quiet, and I just talked to her for a little bit, and then I had to go. So her grandfather told me, she said, what's his real name? And he said, oh, well, that's Colonel Bristol. He's a famous Marine hero. He's famous. And she said, yeah, but Colonel, that's not a name. Like, what's his real name? What's his real name? And he said, well, his real name is George. And so he said, she said it like 3 or 4 times. She goes, George. She might be one of the only people in Flathead County that calls me George.
That's awesome.
And so, you know, there have been times with her, I try to see her when I can. And, you know, I told her, you know, we're going to have a granddaughter pretty soon. And she said, George, I'm going to help you be a really good grandfather. But the best thing in the world is when, you know, and I know her and I care about her, and I know she loves me. She tells me that all the time. And, you know, I don't get to see her that much. And I've made real solid rules because of what I'm doing. Like, you know, she's like, well, could I take a ride with you? And I said, honey, you're never going to take a ride with me. Take a ride with your parents when you grow up. And, you know, I've told her, like, if somebody makes you feel funny, you get away from them right away. And she's about 8 years old going on 80. But, Jesse, there's nothing better. I went to see her one time, and I had been gone for a while, you know, down south. And she said, George, I want to tell you something. And she's got pretty thick glasses. She was really close to my face. And she said, George, when you go sometimes, she said, my stomach hurts and my eyes get all watery. And I was thinking, like, and, you know, her mom and dad, who are great people, they're always telling me how much I spoil her. And I told them once, I said, I could buy her something every day for 1,000 days, and it wouldn't mean as much to me as the fact. And she tells everybody that she's my best friend, and I'm her best friend.
Oh, that's cool.
So, you know, that's probably, you know, one of the girls that I don't know if I mentor. I think she mentors me.
Oh no, absolutely. No. Well, but don't you feel like, though, like when you're giving something to somebody, I mean, that's the greatest gift ever.
Definitely.
I mean, it's so much better to give to somebody and watch them benefit from it.
Yeah.
It's so much better.
And it's, you know, and the other thing with her, so her grandmother asked me, she said, George, I know this is a big ask, but I'd like you to put on your dress blues, you know, and take a picture with Isabella. So when she's older, she'll know. So we did. And I had bought her this Wonder Woman costume that she put on. So they took some pictures, you know, and I mean, I could break any camera, but so when we got done, she was just looking at me, and I said, honey, what's the matter? And she said, you know, I know all that's supposed to mean something. She said, but I don't recognize you like that. And so I said, do you want me to change? And she said, I do. She goes, are you mad at me? I said, no. So I went in and, you know, came out looking like I do right now. And she took me by the hand and she said, that's my George. That's the George I recognize. Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And what a cool thing, because, you know, you've been recognized your entire life for somebody that wears that. Yep. And then for have someone see you, just you.
Yeah.
And not know any different. That's
she,
amazing.
I bought her a Marine Corps sweatshirt, though. She likes that.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, because it's soft, right?
That's marketing. That's marketing.
Good for you. Good for you. Yep. We're gonna dive into some more things here in just a sec, but let's take a quick break. If you haven't noticed lately, Cascade County is booming. And one of the places I depend on to get all my construction needs is Builder's First Choice. Whether you're a contractor or a do-it-yourselfer, Builder's First Choice has everything you need. Stop out and see their amazing staff for all your building supplies today. Are you looking to replace those floors in your home? Or maybe you're doing new construction? The place I trust is Contract Flooring Carpet One. This is a locally owned and operated business here in Great Falls, and they are committed to serving you and giving you the very best prices and the very best product and service. Go see Contract Flooring Carpet One today. The Double Barrel Cafe is all about you, the amazing people of Cascade County. With every purchase you make, they give back to our community. Every bite and sip fuels their mission. Let's make a positive change, one cup and one bite at a time, because the Double Barrel is not just a cafe, they're building a better community. When deciding who I would trust for the technology component of this podcast, the choice was simple: Information Systems of Montana. Whether purchasing products for business or when I had them build me a new MacBook to catch child predators, they delivered, creating a solution for my exact needs. Contact Information Systems of Montana today. Your health journey is as unique as you are. The Peak Great Falls has everything you need for your fitness journey. They are your partner in wellness, with a top-notch facility, an expert staff, and a very welcoming vibe. Locally owned, community-driven. Join them today. One of the best family-owned businesses in Great Falls is Schulte's Coffee House. They have amazing coffees, frozen yogurts. You can even stop in and fill up your car. They are a full-fledged convenience store and are world famous for their chicken and my wife's favorite, the Bosco sticks. Go check out Schulte's Coffee House today. If you're passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment like I am, one of the best places in all of Montana to go is Mitchell Supply. Jim and Tammy Mitchell have been running this gun store for decades. They're major supporters of the Second Amendment, and they're major supporters of our community. And obviously, they're supporters of this podcast. For all your firearms needs, go check out Mitchell Supply today. And we're back. So, one of the things I wanted to kind of comment on is, I was super fortunate when I grew up. I had some amazing mentors. My dad was a super good mentor to me. Yep. But what he did was he purposely always found other men, and then he made me be mentored by them.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
Like he kind of set it up, for lack of a better term. I don't know if you know who Colonel Red Wilson is. Yep. Retired Army Colonel. He's in the Phoenix Project in Vietnam.
Yep. Sure
Actually,
was.
the 45 on my hip today he gave to me.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So just a great mentor of mine.
Jesse, I know everyone's going to ask. Would you please show that on the camera? Everyone's going to ask what's on your hip.
I'm not going to pull it out, but I'll explain. It's a custom Jim Hogue 45. Jim Hogue was a famous gun maker back in California. Yep. I think he's still alive, but doesn't. I don't think he does work anymore. But amazing stuff, and he carried this when he was my dad's undersheriff, and it was really cool. He gave it to me a couple weeks ago. It was really awesome. But he was just this gruff guy. There's another guy named Mike McFerrin who was a deputy sheriff in Lewis and Clark County. Mm-hmm. And a friend of my dad's. And I mean, I could go on and on about all these really cool, great, and they were all old, really, like you said, gruff men.
Absolutely.
No BS.
Nope.
And it was awesome.
Yeah, I think, and when you, all of a sudden, you realize that, I mean, for me now, for sure, like I'm one of those guys, I never thought, that anybody, a lot of people that have worked for me, now they're colonels, they're working for me when they're like a lieutenant, and, they're like, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And I think it's a good thing. And I think men should take mentorship very seriously, and realize what you're saying, because I just tell you one kind of cool one. So I think I was a lieutenant. And, when Gerald Ford was the president, he took a tumble down Air Force One, and Chevy Chase of Saturday Night Live used to make fun of him every week. So
I've seen that.
Yeah. So anyway, I was out at Camp Pendleton, and, we get these groups of actors coming through, and, I was a lieutenant, probably the oldest lieutenant in the Marine Corps, because I'd been an enlisted guy for a pretty long time. So it was, his name was Steve Ford. He was Gerald Ford's son, and he was an actor on some soap opera show. Good-looking guy. And, but, we're walking around, you're kind of showing him, and I was thinking, man, I just want to get out of here, Right. So anyway, we sat down, and, And so we were talking, and I said, what was it like, when your dad was president? And he said, I was pissed off a lot because they were making fun of my dad. People on Saturday Night Live, they were making fun of him. And so he said, I went and asked my dad. And he goes, I'm going to tell you something about my dad, Lieutenant. Like he was I think I was older than him. But, he said, my dad looked at me and said, son, I came to the presidency after Watergate, after we'd had a president expelled. I think he used the term expelled. And he said, our nation was shook. And if somebody comes home at the end of the day after working and wondering what's going to happen tomorrow, and they see that with me or Chevy Chase, and he goes, I think he's pretty funny. And he said, that's fine with me. And so his son said, Dad, you were a fighter. I think he said you were a fighter pilot in World War II. You were an All-American at the University of Michigan, football player. You're probably the most athletic president we ever had. And people were making fun of you for being clumsy. And he said, son, I know who I am. And later, he said when his mom, Betty Ford Center, and I think President Ford was no longer the president. There was Barbara Walters, and she's a tough interviewer, really tough. And she said, it must have been embarrassing for you, to have your wife's thing all. And he said, my dad had a certain way of looking at people when he was really mad, but he could keep his temper. And he said he just looked at her and he said, my wife had a problem that a lot of people have. She went and did something about it, and she went 1 or 2 or 10 steps further by creating the Betty Ford Center. I loved her then. I love her now. I love her always. And I thought, that's the guy. That's the guy. Sometimes what's happening right now, I'm like, I want that guy.
Yeah.
I want that guy. So, I think, but like you said, you get, you want to be a mentor if you feel, you can help. And, sometimes you get as much out of it as they do for sure. Maybe more. Or maybe more.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk real quick. You have a very interesting college degree. Is it like, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't you like an English literature major?
I am. Yeah. Well,
so how does it, just hold on a second. How does a guy who's like, well, I don't really care for school that much. I had to muddle my way through it. I'm sorry, Colonel, but English literature is the last thing I would have picked.
Amen. I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll tell you. So when I was an enlisted guy, I had a couple of people from my hometown that said, we want you to go to college. And, I was not a happy guy growing up, but I went in the Marine Corps. So I was taking some college courses, and this is in the 70s, pretty basic then. There was no such thing as the GI Bill or anything like that. But I like to read. I did. And I don't want to say like I was a lonely kid, but I was pretty lonely, but I did a lot of reading and I enjoyed it. And, so we're in this class. I was just taking it, you just take the ones that are available, and it was by a guy, and he's a World War II veteran. He had lost his leg in Bougainville, and he was talking, and he said, these books are classics. And I said, well, what's the best book ever written? And without any hesitation, he said, David Copperfield. And I had no idea what that was. And I said, well, how do you know that? He goes, read the book. So I was like, okay, I'll read the book. So at the beginning, it's Charles Dickens. It was kind of boring, but then as I got into it, I watched, it was this book about this young guy, and he's got a mom who's very sweet and kind, but very weak. His father had died. She had remarried, and the guy was mean to him, sent him away to a boarding school. There was a kid in the boarding school who was very charming, but very flawed. And all along, he's got this distant cousin who's, I think she's in love with him from the start, and this really tough aunt. And there's a part in the book, and I remember got to it, I have it underlined to this day. And he says, will I always be drawn to the tinsel people of the world that look so bright, but when you touch them, they just fade away? And this girl, her name was Agnes Wickfield. I still remember this. And so she looked at him and she said, you're what you are because of them. Only the best steel goes through the fire. And all of a sudden I started thinking, this is a pretty cool thing. But to be honest, I needed a degree so I got selected in the officer program. I needed a degree. I would have done underwater basket weaving or zoology, but I liked English, and there was a teacher there, a gal named Rachel Stewart, in one of the schools that I attended, and I think she thought I could write the great American novel. I was a big disappointment to her because I kept saying, Dr. Stewart, I'm going to go right back to the Marine Corps. But I read a lot of good books, and I still read a lot of good books. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
If you're involved in anything in leadership, you got to read.
You do.
I mean, that's how you obtain your information.
And there's some great stuff to read.
So, would I be correct in saying that did your imagination help? Like, because a lot of what I'm getting out of you is as a young child, and even as a young adult, you say things, and I like what you say. You say, I was alone a little bit. I was kind of lonely, and I mean, I can relate to that a lot too. Mm-hmm. I was an only child. But I spent a lot of time alone, and sometimes I had a hard time relating with certain people. And did you use your imagination to kind of catapult you places? Like, did you use visualization to say, okay, I want to be that guy?
Yeah.
And then you just took that role on and became that guy? I can kind of see that in you.
Yeah, I did. And that was, it wasn't like Elvis Presley, I mean, I remember we had a lot of guys from my era, they were all combing their hair like that wasn't happening with me. But I think I did. And, sports was a lot of that. I remember, I'm from New England, and we had a guy playing for the Red Sox, Carl Yastrzemski, and we just all, he was the guy. So I remember going to and this will shock the audience if they're young. I remember I went to a Red Sox game for $6. A nice seat for $6.
Add 2 zeros to it probably now.
So I went down, I was looking for him, and he was in the dugout and he was smoking. And I was like, oh my gosh, nobody smoke. He's smoking. He's an athlete. Some years later, I heard a really funny story. There was a guy who played for the Padres named John Kruk, who was a heck of a player. And he told this story about one night he had gone like 4 for 6 in a doubleheader. He was a great player, and he said he felt really good about himself. So he's walking out to his car, and he had 2 hot dogs and a beer. And this lady came up to him, and she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You're a professional athlete." And he's looking, and he said, "I was chewing on the hot dog." I said, "Lady, I'm not an athlete. I'm a baseball player." So I don't know if he was anybody's idol, but those are both pretty funny. But yeah, I think you do that, and as you kind of feel like, this is the guy, that I want to be, and you push towards that. And I think, inspiration and visualization, is a big thing for that. And, when you do what we do for a living, you carry a gun and all that, there are a lot of people who think they want to do that. I would tell them it's not always that fun, it's not fun at all. But I think, when you, at that point, you got to kind of make your own life. And, my mom was a big thing to me just because of what was going on in our house. And I remember, when I left for the Marine Corps, she's about 5'4", and they come get you real early in the morning, and I was ready to go. I was definitely ready to go. And I remember she came out there. She daughter of Portuguese immigrants that were incredible, just an incredible story. I don't mind people coming across the border as long as they do it. Yeah. They do it the way my grandparents did.
Legally?
Yep. So my mom she got one step up, and she was looking at me eye to eye, and she said, I've had a lot of tough things these past years, and, you're more like my friend than you are my son. She said, and I feel like I can do almost anything. She said, but I don't think I'm going to be able to take the fact that you're going to turn around in a minute and you're going to walk out of my life forever. And I did not, it was as close as I had come to crying, since I was about 7 years old. I remember I was looking down. She had bought me this shaving kit. It wasn't a real expensive one. I had that. I saw that car come up. I turned around. I went down there, and I didn't look back. And I remember when I got to Parris Island, they took that shaving kit. They were like, "You don't need this." They threw it away. But, my mom was super tough. she was just super tough lady in a quiet kind of way. And, you know, she encouraged that. You know, I used to kind of, you know, I would tell her, you know, hey, someday, you know, just hang on, Mom, just hang on, you know. And but I think that, yeah, I kind of saw myself as a certain thing. I don't know if I saw myself as a Marine, but I liked the action. I did.
Yeah.
I did like the action. And,
Absolutely.
And it, you know, yeah, that was a big part of it.
Absolutely. So talk to me about your transition. And so you did 2 tours as enlisted, or 2,
Yep.
sorry.
2 and a little more.
I
yeah.
mean 2 tours, two probably 4-year
Yep.
4-year re-enlists, right?
I did, yep.
And then you decide, you know, obviously the Marine Corps is home for you now. I mean,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
your home, and you're like, okay, I'm going to invest in this.
Yep.
And you decide to become an officer.
Yeah, and I thought I made the worst mistake of my life. Okay, so my grandfather and grandmother. One of the really great stories is my grandmother and grandfather were an arranged marriage. They met when they were, I think, 15, and her mother said, "You're going to marry that guy." They got married and got on a boat to New Bedford, Massachusetts. Like they landed there, couldn't speak a word of English. You know, and my grandfather, just a really tough, hard guy, had my mother and her brother, who's just a great guy. And I remember, so I went to several schools. I was going to several schools to get that degree. You know, it's one of those ones that looks like every easy course, you know, just checking right through to get the hours. And so after I graduated, I remember my grandfather was looking at me and he said, what did you do? He had a really thick Portuguese accent. He used to call me Georgie, what did you do? And I said, Grandpa, what are you talking about? I'm a lieutenant. And he said, you were a sergeant. You had respect. You had everything. That was all he knew. He had seen, you know, maybe some movie where there was a sergeant. But, you know, so then when I went up to the basic school, which is where all the officers go, you're there for 6 months. You know, it doesn't matter what you're going to do, you're there. And I remember at the beginning, I was like, boy, all my friends are enlisted guys. You know, I'd had a good run as an enlisted guy. You know, I'd played a lot of sports. I was kind of a jock in there. And all of a sudden, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And there was a guy, and he's a legend in the Marine Corps. He's passed on now. His name is Wayne Rawlings. He was a recon Marine like me. He used to call me Big Hoss. Big Hoss. He went, yeah, really Southern accent. Big Hoss. He goes, you're just going to get yourself through this now. And so when I
love that. That was great.
Yeah, he was just this super guy. And you know, we were both, I used to see him, we'd work out a little bit together. He was a real stud too, big Vietnam veteran. And I remember, you know, I just started seeing, okay, you start climbing the ladder, you know, I mean, you've done that, you know exactly what it is. And then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, you're in charge of people. You're not much older than them, but you're in charge, and you got to be tough. And at the beginning, I'll admit it, you know, my fists were part of that. You know, I'd be like, you're going to do what I tell you right now. But then you realize that doesn't work. It's like yelling past a point doesn't work. And then, you know, all of a sudden you'll, and, you know, I'll just give you a really good example. I was a lieutenant, and a kid that really liked me, you know, he was in my platoon. I didn't pay any more attention to him than I did anybody else, but he got killed in a car accident. So, you know, we were, what do you do, and how are you going to do it? And so I got a note, and there was no email or anything in those days. I got this note from the battalion adjutant, who's like the admin guy, and he said, they've requested that you take the body home. And I said, okay, all right. And so it was in Iowa. You know, I'm a New England boy. I'd never really been much in the Midwest. So I take that body home, and his parents came to meet us, and they were like, oh my gosh, Lieutenant Bristol, it's so great, you know, that you're here. You know, you and John, the guy's first name was John, you and John have such a great relationship. And I was thinking like, ooh. I mean, I don't remember talking to him any more than I did anybody else. So they said, would you like to stay for dinner? And I said, yeah, okay, sure. And it was like a great Midwestern meal, big thing. All these people are looking at me, and so I'm nervous. Like I'm kind of like, what am I gonna say? So we went into their living room after they were eating, and they had these huge slices of apple pie. That's what I remember. They were like really, really big, and everybody's sitting there, his whole family. And I was looking at pictures, and I see a picture of me and him, and I'm kind of putting my hand on top of his head, and I remembered where it was. We were in a tug of war. We were doing what they call a field meet, and he and I were in the tug of war, and we won it. And somebody snapped that picture, and she said, "Boy, I bet you remember that picture, don't you?" And I said, "Oh, yes, ma'am, I remember it was a tug of war." And I was just getting really, really nervous. So anyway, she said, "I want to show you on the back." So she flipped it over, and there was a letter that he had written. And it said, "Mom and Dad, best day of my life. Praise from Lieutenant Bristol. He's the biggest, fastest, and strongest guy that I've ever met. All of us want to be like him. And to think that he took time out to tell me how good I pulled." He goes, "Please put this picture up and leave it up." Wow. And I remember so I went outside, and it was like a nice night and all that. And I was thinking, I don't deserve that. I don't deserve it. So I told his dad, I said, I didn't even really know him any better than anybody else. He said, "It wasn't your job to know him. It was your job to inspire him, and you certainly did that." And, when something like that happens to you, all of a sudden, it's like when you got binoculars, and you can't see, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, this isn't just about the great climb of G.H. Bristol to the top of the pyramid, right? And and it's the same thing, And then later, when you're a lot better at it. So we were in Fallujah, which is a bad place, and I'm a colonel, and I got this guy, J.J. Garcia, and he was my driver, motor T guy. He wasn't a special ops guy for sure, but he was a good driver. And so all of a sudden they start firing away. It was Al Qaeda, and everybody. We got out. By then I'd been in a lot of shooting, and so like a lot of young guys, and you know this. You naturally shoot high. You start killing those clouds real quick, at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I looked at him. I said, "Garcia, you're shooting clouds." I said, "Put the weapon down and shoot a couple into the ground." And all of a sudden he looked at me, and he was a very respectful guy. And he said, "Yeah, that's fine for you to say. You love this. You love this." He said, "Me, I just want to get back." And he was like this. And so I was, there, like kind of on top of the Jeep top firing away. And I was having a pretty good day there too. I remember I just took my hand off the thing, and I was going about like that. I said, "Okay, do you see, Garcia? Do you see?" So later, he came in and he said, "I'm kind of embarrassed that I said that." And I said, Get away from me. And I said, "Just get away from me." And then he kind of looked hurt. I said, "This happens to everybody, buddy." I said, "Now you can go to home and tell everybody how brave you are." He goes, "Is that what you do?" I said, "Every day," like that. And then the other one is I have a kid. So same, we're in Afghanistan, and we were given these big re-enlistment bonuses. I mean, big ones, like $85,000.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so you get half of it up front, and then they put it for the next 4 years as you. So anyway, I get this kid. He's a really great kid. He's part of my personal security detachment. We were in a lot of stuff together. He's a corporal. And so the career planner comes in, we're all in Afghanistan, and his job is to keep re-enlisting, mm-hmm. and we're in competition with another colonel, who's going to do more. So anyway, he said, "Sir, you got to get this guy. You got to pull that magic, that Bristol magic. You got to get this guy." So I'm like, okay. So he comes in, this kid, Hoagland, that was his name. And he said, I said, "Hoagland, what's going on? What's the problem?" And he said, "Well, sir," and he was a super polite guy, good looking guy, and he said, "Sir, I'm kind of pissed off that I have to be in here in front of you." And the career planner and my sergeant major were like ready to pull his head off. And I said, "Hey, wait. I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Sir, you already know what I think of you. You know what I think of you. You know what we all think of you." he said, and I never told you this because I wanted to wait till the end, but he said, everybody in my family has done one tour in the Marine Corps, going all the way back to my great-grandfather. And he said, it's a tradition in my family. And he said, I'm from, I can't remember, somewhere in Missouri. I have no idea where he was from. So he said, you know, sir, I've saved $45,000 during this enlistment. And he said, I already applied to the Troops to Teachers program. And he said, I want to go back to my hometown. I've been going out with this girl, I guess what they call it, going out with this girl, since I was in junior high. I'm going to marry that girl. I got three nieces that I want to see every day. And he said, I remember you told us if we get out of the Marine Corps, you need to buy plenty of Marine Corps sweatshirts because you're going to go home and you're going to want to wear them every day. He said, I already got those sweatshirts, sir. And I swear to you, every kid that I teach will understand the legacy of the United States Marine Corps. So he said, that's why I'm pissed off. I don't think I'm wasting my life by not staying in the Marine Corps. So I looked at the career planner, who was a great guy, and I said, go, just go.
Yeah.
Just go away.
Yeah.
And I told my son, and so, you know, when you see stuff like that, you know, I didn't do anything remarkable. I just happened to be there at the time. And so you look at that, and I mean, you know, you've had people die, you know, It's hard. You know, there's I can't remember the name of the movie, but it says, you know, that when somebody passes, no matter how they do in our profession, you don't spend a lot of time thinking about the last full measure of devotion, and all you remember is how great they are, and you're not going to see them anymore. I can tell just by looking at you right now, you know exactly what I'm saying. And, you know, then there's that one movie with Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven. He said, hell of a thing to kill a man. You take all he's got and all he's ever going to have. And but those kind of experiences, you know, they fortify you. You don't want them to be commonplace because they never are. They're all a little bit different.
So, you know, I've had those experiences where you have an impact on somebody and you had no idea.
Yep.
You have no, and it is. I love how honest you are about saying how like you're nervous and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I didn't know,
because it makes you feel horribly.
I was thinking, Jesse, what am I doing here?
Right.
Like
exactly.
I wanted to go stay at the little hotel down the road there.
But I mean, I always think that's a God thing. I always think that it's his devout will that he's like, remember when because you said it earlier, men make plans and God laughs at us, right? Oh, yeah. And I think that's right then. Yep. We're making a plan. And I've lived my life a similar way in law enforcement, but I didn't climb the ladder. I jumped it. I went from a police detective to the sheriff, just jumped all that stuff in the middle. And I think though that's the kind of the divine part of your life is that you're looking at checking boxes, X's and O's, execution,
definitely
mission planning.
Because you have to.
No, you do. Yep. But then he takes this brief moment of your life and he says, okay, that's influence.
Absolutely.
That's impact right there.
Yep.
And
so I'll tell you,
it shakes you to your bones when that happens.
So Jesse, I'm a good Catholic boy. I'm a good Catholic boy, you know, and a lot of people, you know, some people in Whitefish said, oh yeah, we tolerate Catholics. I said, yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. But anyway, so when I was my mom made us all go to church, big Catholic church in Rhode Island. And so I always like to think that this was what started it. So you have this thing called First Communion, you know, I don't know a lot about how other denominations do it, but it's like a year pilgrimage, you know. Oh, yeah. And I was a pretty rambunctious
I had
boy.
A Catholic girlfriend in high school, so I've been down this road.
So anyway, we're in this big Catholic church. We're late, and I was pretty tall, you know, and big. My ears are about the same size when I was 6, probably as they are now. So we're walking late. My mom's got 4 sisters, and she's heading into what they call the crying room because they put kids over there. And by the way, my mom used to always tell this story, and she said, by the way, George, those were cloth diapers with all your sisters at that point. So anyway, so they go back in the crying room. So we were sitting by classes and First Communion class but I'm late. So I go walking up. We had a lot of nuns in there. And, I used to say a lot of bad things about nuns. But anyway, so I'm walking up and all of a sudden I'm looking for my nun and she's not around. I used to tell people, I think she was out smoking a cigarette, which is a bad thing to say. But anyway, so all of a sudden this nun grabs me and she throws me into this aisle. And I go, sister, this is nice. She goes, shh. Like that. And they used to use these little clickers to have me get up and get down.
Yep.
So I'm sitting there. I'm kind of the same height as all these kids. I know none of these kids. I can see my class like 2 rows up. So, okay, so we're doing it. Mass was in Latin. You just kind of going along. All of a sudden, the time comes for communion. My mom, meanwhile, and I asked her later, I said, why did you even see me? And she goes, I had my own problems back there, She was changing diapers. So anyway, click, get up. I was just sitting there and she goes, get up. She had no idea who I was, but I mean, why would she? So at that moment, 2 people in that church know something is definitely wrong. My mom looks and she said she told some lady, watch the girls, and she came shooting out up one side of the church. The other one was my sister, Sister Mary Hugh, wherever you are, you know who you are. And so she comes up the side, but it was too late. So, and in those days, and I'm not being bad to say this, you didn't chew that host and you didn't say anything. So and my mom said she was watching me and I was peeling off to the side to see what was going on. But it was too late. He said, the body of Christ. He rammed that thing right up into my palate and I went like that. And then I started chewing. And as I turned away to get out of there, this nun grabs me and she takes me back in this thing called the vestibule where there's just endless candles being lit. And she said, you've committed a mortal sin. She said it just like that. And I was like, sister, you talk. She goes, you shut your mouth. You've committed a mortal sin. And all of a sudden, my mom, who never said a bad word about anybody, she had me by the ear and she said, you can take your hands off my son now. So anyway, so she said, well, he committed a mortal sin. She goes, I am sure he did not put himself in that row. I'm sure someone else did. So I'm looking at my mom and I'm like, check out my mom going to bat for me. But anyway, a priest comes in. He comes in and he's a really nice man. And he says, George, I think God has a special thing for you. Okay. So I was like, oh, yeah, sure he does. And so he said, don't you worry about it. So I remember I walked out of the church with my mom and my sister. I said, I'm never going back in a Catholic church ever again.
Yeah, no kidding.
And but I think that, you see these things and I had, I had a really good friend that, was a monk that became a monk. And I used to kind of defend him when he was a little kid. And I remember, I was like, how could he be like that? And I was very jealous. He had a really nice family. And I used to think, why is my family like this? But I think God does. He puts things in your way, and, and, when I had a guy, and this is a sad one, is in Afghanistan. And I love this guy. I love them all, but I love this guy. And the guys that were there's a lot of them still around. And another day, I had worked that night and some guys were going out into the day to this place in Afghanistan and, everything seemed fine. And I would sit in the combat operations center just for a little while, drinking coffee, not the best thing to do before you're going to sleep, but I would just sit there. This kid's name was Chris. And early on in his career, he had worked for me and he failed a shooting package supposedly by 1 round.
Is this the Force Recon shooting package?
Yep. So, which is a tough shooting package.
It's, do you remember Pat Rogers?
I do.
So I trained with Pat extensively. And
I think your dad, didn't your dad bring like a 30-30 in there or something?
So yeah, that's what I heard. That's yes, he did. And he outshot everybody with ARs.
And Pat, and that's it's a tough course. Pat's one of the guys that designed that course.
Yeah.
So I see this kid, Chris Antonick. He's kind of sitting on the side, and he was one of these guys. He had kind of the manga hair. He couldn't really comb it or anything. And I said, "What's the matter with you?" And he said, "Well, sir, I'm missing." I said, "Sit up straight when you're talking to me." And I was just pissed because I only had X amount of guys that I could provide to this unit. So I went and grabbed the 2 instructors. I said, shoot them again right now. And this was during the early days of OIF1. And so I needed guys in there. And and they said, sir, we're the authority. I said, I'm the authority, shoot him again. And he maxed the course. So he maxed it.
Wow.
So
that's
I grabbed
tough
him.
to do.
Yeah, I grabbed him by the hair and I said, you remember this. Okay. So a couple of years go by. I hear that he won the instructor of the year for that shooting package. And
nice.
So then now we're back in Afghanistan and he's a staff sergeant. Okay. And I got all these guys. I had several guys that had been in my recon battalion when they were young. And so I have immense power over them, right? So anyway, so we had this congressional delegation. I know you've had to deal with them. And, they're a pain, oh, Jesse, tell me all the inner secrets of what you're doing here. Oh, sure, sir. But anyway, so we're out there and these guys, they gave these guys some 9mm to shoot, some Berettas so they wouldn't hurt anybody. And, they're pointing at you and they're hitting the door over there. But anyway, so Antonik's kind of out there showing him stuff. And I was looking at him and all of a sudden I realized, I remember him when he was a boy. And he's such a man now. So I came up to him, and I'm a big 45 guy still. And so I said, Chris, show me what you just did. All these people are standing around because I'm, Colonel Bristol, the great Colonel Bristol. And I said, and he's looking at me. He goes, well, sir, we're just showing him how we're. And I said, oh, really? And so I said, ladies and gentlemen, I've done, some duty with a 45, and one of my guys right on schedule, he goes, Colonel Bristol killed 2 guys the other night with a 45. And so I said, but I learned something today. And and Antonik's just looking at me. He's just looking at me like, you are an idiot. And so anyhow, I put the 45 away, and then we were getting that congressional delegation out of there, thank God. And he said, sir, you taught me that. Don't you remember that? So I grabbed him by the hair again, and I said, you were a boy then, Chris, you're a man now. And he told a really good friend of his, he said, I felt like I'd been touched by the hand of God. So we take off that morning into this place, and I'm listening to the radio, and all of a sudden I hear him, and he said, I'm hit. I'm done. And he said it is Shadow 6. That was my call sign. And I got on there. I said, you're okay. You're going to be okay. And he goes, no, sir, I'm not going to be okay. And I stayed there, and all of a sudden, he went pretty quickly. And that night when they came back in, I flew the resupply, and we did a lot of stuff, and I went around to see all those guys, because a lot of them, that was the first time they'd seen anybody, and I remember I was telling them all, I was saying, look, I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you're alive. And there's this one guy, and he's a pretty famous Marine now, because he took over that. He was a dog handler. He wasn't a MARSOC guy. He wasn't a Marine yet, a Special Operations Marine. And he had this Belgian Malinois named Pasha, who I really liked. I like all those dogs. And Chris put him in charge before he died. And he won the Navy Cross that day, which is right below the Medal of Honor. Wow. And I remember I was in there, and I had Billy by the shoulders, and I was like, you didn't do this. You did not do this. I said, some scumbag did this. You did nothing but great. And I remember Pasha, the dog, was in the crate, and she was growling at me because she thought I was hurting him.
Oh, yeah.
But my point is, you have those moments with people, and, like with Antonik, I still think about that to this day, because we had that minute. But the point really is, God, I've never seen any atheists on a battlefield. You hear that all the time. There's none of them. They're screaming.
Yeah, I think I've heard there's no atheists in a foxhole or something like that. But yeah, I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah, one of our chaplains, this guy named Bill Devine, he's retired now, Catholic chaplain, by the way, everybody. And So right before we went into Fallujah, he was like right down there up front. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's got this, George, he told me one time, he goes, George, I hear the men say you say the rosary. And I said, yeah, chaplain, I'm so good at it. I haven't finished one yet. I fall asleep. And he goes, so do I, but your guardian angel will finish it for you. So anyway, he's up there and he's handing out communion to anybody. And this one kid comes up and he's looking and he goes, my mother is a Baptist and my father's Jewish. He said, I don't really know what you're doing. And Chaplain Divine, God bless him, he just said, come over here and get some of this stuff before you go forward. And he stuck it right into his mouth. So, I mean, people who say, oh, I'm the cool thing with kids today, I'm agnostic. I'm like, you wouldn't know agnostic if it punched you. But yeah, those things are there. I know I'm rambling with some of these stories.
No. This is.
Are you kidding? We're loving this.
No, this is great.
Amazing.
And one of the things that is funny. So first, two things I want to touch on. So the Marsa Qual is no joke. It's shot under time.
Yep.
Most of it's shot on the move.
Absolutely.
And there's transitions involved.
Yep.
And I have shot it dozens of times.
Yep.
I've done very well on it a few times, but I've seen career SWAT guys who can't pass it.
Oh yeah.
And so like just little context to the story is a lot of qualifications we think of in military and law enforcement. We're like, oh yeah, qualifications are dumb. They're just a check in the box. This is not a check in the box.
No. and but you know what I say this a lot to guys that I've worked with, they're always like, sir, your nickname was Manhunter. I said, yeah. And the Manhunter missed many. I'm telling you, in firefights, there's a movie, Wind River.
I've seen
one of the greatest movies ever.
Great movie.
I'm a big 45-70 guy, so that I like what's going on. That gunfight in there, where they're all in front of those trailers, guys are like, boy, they can't shoot. I said, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
And you watch these guys fumbling. And I said, who was really impressive was the girl. She was wounded already, got shot in the chest with a shotgun, and she's still looking for a magazine and trying to do a magazine change. And that right there, when shooting of any type is really cool, but, those kind of things, and this, it's the world narrows down to something really, really small, and all you want to do is beat the clock. That's our expression.
Absolutely.
Beat the clock. So I'm just going to tell you one more funny one. So, So anyway, I got the British SAS were working with us for a lot, and I got some really good friends there. And I was in charge really of all the special operations for a pretty long period of time in Western Afghanistan. And so my counterpart, he was a lieutenant colonel. His name's Charlie Collins. He's a general now. But he looks like he's like 10 years old, like a lot of these British officers. Everything you think about a spoiled,
Right.
So anyway, Charlie, one afternoon he comes into my office, and I did go out quite a bit, maybe sometimes a little too much, but so he said, Colonel George, tonight we're going across the border into Pakistan, into Baramcha, which is just one of these places where all they do is kill all day. They kill each other. They'll kill anybody that comes in. And he said, wouldn't you like to come along with us? I said, yeah, sure, Charlie, I'll come. My NCOIC, he was like, Colonel, just, you've already gotten dinged. And I said, no, this is going to be fun. So I like the SAS. And also I want to make sure they know who the best unit is. And it's not the SAS. It was Marine Special Operations Command. But anyway, so we get on. So Charlie comes out, and he's lean, but not like a muscular guy. And like I said, looks like a teenager, blonde hair, very cute. So, we got helmets that,
he's prepubescent.
He looked, So anyway, and he's got this little skinny vest. It's like one of those CrossFit vests, that people put on. And he's got a Browning high power pistol, no rifle. And so, I'm completely kitted up, and I said, Charlie, aren't you a little light tonight? And he goes, I'm right where I'm supposed to be, sir. So anyway, we get on the helicopter, pretty long ride, and I was kind of asleep on the way down. But then you start going into that hover, and we're going to fly right onto the main street in the city, and it's going to get get hot right away. So anyway, Charlie, so their motto, the SAS, is "Who dares wins," which is a super cool motto. You know, it really is. So anyway, Charlie jumps up. We're all, got a headset on. And Charlie jumps up. He pulls out his Browning high power, which I'd probably let my wife use, And he goes, "Gentlemen, tonight we're joined in combat by the famous Manhunter, and we will wreak havoc in Baramchad." He goes, "Who dares wins." The ramp comes down, and he runs off, and he's blazing away with his 9mm Browning. I didn't see him. I didn't see him for the whole time. And so we all got back on the bird. We had a great night, too. So I'm like, "Charlie." So I pulled his little skinny head over, and I said, "Charlie, did you actually hit anything?" And he goes, "Oh, of course not." He goes, "Purely ceremonial rounds for motivation." And I remember I thought, like, how cool is that? And then when we got back, he said, we get back on the ground. And I mean, this guy is just oozing cool. James Bond got nothing on Charlie Collins. So he's walking and he goes, "Colonel George, I'll be away back in the UK for a few weeks." And I said, "Really, where are you going?" And and one of the guys goes, "Oh, sir, his wife's delivering a baby." And he goes, "Boss, you'll have 3 girls." And he looked at him and he went, "John, takes a man to make a girl." And he just walked away. I mean, so you know what? I just don't have that cool gene, but they certainly do.
So, I have so many questions about that. So is those the only rounds he fired? Did he just go into the?
I think he was just out there directing traffic, but they. When you look back at their World War II record and all the stuff that they did, I mean they're right up. And the other funny thing about a lot of this, and is there's a lot of gallows humor out there.
Oh yeah.
I've had a few watches just like you, and guys would be like, "Colonel Bristol, if you burn in on this parachute, can I have that watch?" But I'll tell you one good deed that I did.
like how they ask when you're going to be dead.
And they're like, they're like,
were they afraid you're going to come back from the dead? And
well, I had a full malfunction one time, and they said, you're a Jonah, Colonel Bristol. So, but anyway, so I have this 45, and I've had it for a long time. And I think it's on like barrel number 7 or 8, Oh,
wow.
And it's just a regular Springfield Armory GI. And I really like it. I've used it for a lot of years, and it's been very successful. But a lot of these guys that I serve with, they're always like, "Well, when you," I'm just going to say, "poop the bed." We have another word for it. But anyway, they say, "When you do that, who are you going to give that to? Who are you going to give that to?" So I was telling my wife, I was really getting nervous about it. Like, I'm really getting nervous about it. So this young kid, whose family I've stayed with when I'm down on the border, his name's Cord, which is the perfect name for a cowboy kid.
Yeah.
And he is just tough. He's like 9 years old. So he, when he was 7, I said, "Cord, what have you been doing?" He goes, "I shot a deer the other day, Colonel Bristol." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I said, what range?" He goes, "About 240. And I said, "What kind of scope were you using, Cord?" He goes, "No, iron sights." I mean, this is just one tough kid.
Yeah.
Ride, everything. Shakes hands like
probably a 30-30.
Could be. He's got a handshake like a pair of pliers, I mean, he's a great kid, and he loves me, he just loves hanging out with me. So I say, "Cord, yeah, you want to clean this?" So he's cleaning it. I know a lot of men that can't put a 45 back together,
oh, yeah.
right? And so anyway, he's just so I told my wife, I said, "You know what? I'm going to give that to Cord." So I told him, and he's young, and his dad's a foreman on this ranch. And so I said, "Cord," he was cleaning it one day. I said, "Cord, what would you think if I told you I'm going to give you that gun when you're a little bit older?" And he looked up at me really serious, and he's always like complete cowboy, complete, right. no pairs of shorts in his dresser drawer. So he looks at me, he goes, "I would honor that gun, Colonel Bristol. That's the gun they call the war horse, right? I know all about that because my dad told me about that." So I said, "You need to go ask your parents." I was leaving the next morning, my dog and I. So it's like between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was just I had forgotten completely that he was going to. All of a sudden I look up and there he is. He's got a white shirt on. He's got creases in his jeans, and he comes up and he grabs my hand and he said, "It's a deal, Colonel Bristol. They said I could take it." So I'm gonna give it to him.
That's
I'm
awesome.
gonna give it to him when he's 10. But I mean,
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
That's such a cool
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
And one of the things is, I mean, I take it that's the gun you carried in combat.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
That's the gun, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's got
yeah.
stories, and
it'll go to a good place.
it's
though.
got bodies. It's got all
does.
sorts of good stuff on it. So,
It's a good piece of kit. Yeah.
So it's done a lot to it's done a lot to keep our republic alive,
and
hasn't it?
it's missed a lot of shots too, for sure.
I'll tell you this. My father-in-law is a knife maker, but also he used to be special operations in Red Horse.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw a machete that he made for himself and for a couple of his guys. I know that thing has been places. I have given him that request.
Yeah.
I said that when you go, that machete, that's mine.
Yeah, you want to have something with a little bit of
History.
a little bit of tang to it. Yeah,
Yes,
that's for sure.
precisely. That's
Yep.
the iron taste.
Yep, absolutely.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But Jesse has a nice gun behind his desk up there. That's
yeah,
he does.
I love,
Yeah,
I
he
love
does.
It. I
So
love
that
it.
so
Got the big loop handle too.
full circle, right?
Yep.
I don't know what we were talking about. That's the 30-30 my dad used.
Oh man.
So he goes down and Pat couldn't believe it. I mean, Pat would tell this story on the internet all the time.
Yep.
He'd talk about it, and I remember my dad telling me, my dad's initials are BS. So that usually tells you that that's part of what he's telling me when he's saying things,
Yep.
and he's hilarious. But he just, I mean, he stretches the occasional war story or two.
Sure.
So he goes down to the school, and he's like, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
It was like Gunsight. I think it was Gunsight. Yep.
It was,
Yep.
but this is when Pat was
Yep.
a range master there.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, yeah, Pat Rogers is my instructor. And I'm like, the Pat Rogers?
Yeah.
I'm like, that guy's a legend.
He is.
So we're exchanging stories and talking about it. And he's kind of talking to me through the week on the phone. And then he's like, hey, he goes, I kind of kicked ass in the carbine section. And I'm like, Dad, you don't own a carbine. So he goes down there because Gallatin County at the time had issued M14s. Mm-hmm. So he goes down there with his M14, and Pat's like, in his New York accent, he's like,
absolutely.
I think he said something like, I don't know what
You
he
have to do the accent as good as he's been doing them tonight.
I don't think I can, but he'd be like, and he remember how Pat, when he talked, he whistled through his teeth.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I can't imitate that.
Yep.
But he'd be like, that's carbine, that's a rifle, and he's like,
that's
you
him.
can't carry that. So he's like, we'll get you something. He's like, what else you got? And he goes, well, between the seats in his car, he goes, what's that? He goes, well, I got it. He goes, that'll do.
Yep.
So this is a true story. They duct tape a flashlight on it because there's a low light component to it. And he takes it out and he does his thing. Well, as they go through the course, he comes out the top guy with this. And here's the crazy part.
And not exactly the best reloading gun in the world.
No,
Yeah.
but he made all the times.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And
That's
one of the
fantastic.
advantages he has, for those that haven't been to Gunsight, there's a lot of scenario-based shooting.
Sure
is that a good way to put it?
Yep, it is.
So you go through these like river bottoms, and then you do shoot houses and all sorts of stuff. Well, when you do the outside stuff, it's all steel falling plates. That's how you know you put down your. Well, they purposely, because it's Gunsight, so it's geared towards 45s and 30 caliber carbines and rifles. They, Colonel Cooper was big on that stuff.
The scout rifle. Lest we forget the scout rifle. Yeah.
I used to have one of those. Those are pretty cool. So anyway, he would go through. Well, if you had a 5.56, you had to hit it like 5 or 6 times, but like in a row, like boom, 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 not this ding. Well, the 30-30 drop it. So he's making up time because he's got knockdown power on his gun.
Absolutely.
It's just,
I mean, those guys like Pat Rogers, he was one of those guys. The ranges were always very safe, but you had no idea that they were because it just looked like absolute, chaos in there. And he would just be sitting there the whole thing. I tell you, he was a heck of a man. He was a heck of a man.
It was funny one day. I'll never forget it. He'd never been to Montana before. And I got in trouble with my wife because I'd been to Gunsight like 5 times, and I was traveling.
It's addictive.
I was traveling the world training, having a good time. And my wife was like, okay, this has got to stop. You've spent like $50,000 and you're going everywhere. So I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'll host him because the host gets a free spot. So of course, who am I going to get? I'm going to get Pat.
Yep.
So I networked through some friends that gave me his number, and I got his cell phone number, and I called him up, and he's just hilarious. And he's like, "Well, I've never been to Montana before," and I said, "Well, you need to come." And so he that was the reason he kind of came, was that. But then during our conversation, he realized who my dad was, and he thought that story was super cool.
It is super cool.
And so then he comes, and like when he came, he went to like the Battle of Little Bighorn, and you know, because for him it was all about the history and the experience. And then I think he came for 3 or 4 solid years. He came up here, and we just had the best time. And
he was very unique. He could be a little bit caustic sometimes, you know, when people, I showed you how to do that already. But he was, and you know, that gun site, you know, now there are a whole bunch of shooting schools, and they're all great.
Yeah.
But you know,
that's the granddaddy.
Oh, big time. And it's still, you know, and talk about in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yeah.
You know, not a whole lot of
Paulden,
Arizona. Paulson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's outside of it's way outside of Prescott.
It is.
So it's not even close.
And you know, I remember a couple guys said, you know, I wanted to bring my wife, but there's nothing there.
There's nothing there for her.
Except a sunburn. That's what you get. You get a sunburn. Yep.
Yeah, it's a crazy place, but it's kind of it's kind of where everyone got started.
Yep. No, it is. And you know, the thing with the shooting, you know, you watch, I just tell you one neat thing, you know, so Marsoc, we're the descendants of the Raiders, you know, the Marine Raiders, right? And so, you know, when you get to talk to those guys, you know, and there's not too many of them left, but, you know, Merritt Edson was one of the Raider commanders, and he had been a national shooting champion and all this. But this guy, and his name is Meacham, he's a really cool guy, and he's you know, I'm pretty sure he's still alive, and he had a BAR. Okay,
oh, yeah.
So he was telling us one day, you know, Browning automatic. And I mean that you definitely know you're shooting something when that thing goes.
They're like,
even at our size,
what are they, like
right?
25 pounds,
big time.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, he said. Yeah, General Edson, Edson was a general by then. He said, you better, I'm going to give you 100 rounds. And he goes, oh, sir, I can take more than that. He goes, you're going to get 100 rounds, and you better hit every shot. And you know, the BAR's job was to like hit machine gun nests and stuff like that. So I asked Mr. Meacham, and he's a really, and I mean this with a lot of respect, he's a really average looking guy, not big, not small. And I said, so how did you do? And he goes, maybe like 93%. That's what he said. So, I mean, when you think about it, that baby's stretching people out, you know, 93 times out of 100. And you know, those guys are so, what they're really happy. And I think older lawmen like Dean Mollum and guys like that, all they want to hear is, they want to hear that everybody's good. Yeah. They're not so much like, you know, we were so much better. They did their thing, and now the boys are doing their thing. And the Raiders are just like that. You know, when they come around, they're like, you know, we're still doing it, right? And we go, yes, sir, we are. And that's what they want to know, and it's fantastic. And
it is. It's
what
awesome.
Stories. You know, the other thing about, you know, they did a great thing for us with PTSD. You know, I think everybody's had some. I certainly have. And they were telling us, they said, you know, it's a lot harder, you guys, today than it was for us. And I said, really? And they said, you know, when we were in the Far East, he said every month, you know, we'd be in the field for a month or so, and then we go down to either Australia or New Zealand. And they said we were partying down there for sure. A lot of them married women from there. And he said we had plenty of beer, and then we came back. He said, but the big thing, we came back on boats. And he said there were guys crying. There were guys puking. There were guys playing a lot of cards. But by the time we got back, we were fairly civilized. And this guy looked at me and he said, George, you know, for you, he said, you get on a plane and you're back 8 hours later and expect it to be great. And my wife, she's no, you know, she's like, hey, I've had a couple of times. One of the first times I came to Montana, Jesse, I got done, and my sleep pattern was all messed up. And she goes, I don't know what you're doing, but you better get yourself squared away. So I did a lot of it in Hamilton, Montana, just walking around out there.
Well, yeah, that's what Red Wilson told me too. Is he said that they sent him to Germany, coming out of it, and they made him stay there for several months. And that's what it was. And they did counseling and they did some stuff, but he said really what it was about was it was like giving them time. Because if you can acclimate to Germany and you're good, now you can go reacclimate back home. But now it's like, and you're right, with
too fast
technology and our aircraft are so fast. I mean, you can be in 12 hours, you're back standing and. I mean, that's
and you know, there's I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, but you know, when you see, and you know, plus with a lot of guys, you know, there's a big stigma, like you never want to, oh, I'm fine, and you know, like there was a couple times, you know, I wasn't fine, I wasn't fine. I mean, I was okay, you know, and then you keep going, and one of the great things that some of the leaders did in SOCOM was, I remember they said, okay, you know, you older guys, you're going to have to take a little test. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been like 10 times over there. And they said, well, who's going to tell you, George, that you can't go? He goes, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you you're going to pass that. And it was, you know, it wasn't hard, but, you know, what you don't want, you know, you get some guys with a big ego sometimes, and you're like, oh, I can still do it, you know, and I think that was a good thing, and I think that the stigma of, you know, going to the shrink, you know, I mean, I was like, there is no way I'm going in there. I have nothing to say to him, and you know, our chaplains and stuff like that are great. Some of them are meant for it, some of them aren't. I'll be honest with you. Some of them are like, you just go over there, you know.
You have to have a sense of humor as a chaplain in our business.
No question. No question. So, but so I mean, so I think that's a good thing. And you know, our young guys today, you know, I mean, the world right now, you know, I'm not all that psyched about it, but
you know, one of the things that I found, so, you know, when I got in a shooting, one of the best things that ever happened to me was, so in law enforcement, you don't have a choice. Like, you literally shoot somebody, and the first thing they introduce you to back is to your wife usually, and it's been like 15 minutes, and she's emotional, and you're trying not to be emotional, but it's hard when you see them, and that's instant. That's 15 minutes. That's 15 hours. It's 15 minutes, and so I think that's creating a lot of that. So one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was, it was probably the next day. And I was hyper vigilant. And I was just, you know, it's just, you feel like you're still there.
It's adrenaline runoff is what it is. It's got to go somewhere. Yeah, exactly.
And someone just told me, like, that's normal. That's totally normal. And understand it's going to stay with you for a certain amount of time.
Exactly.
The more exercise, if you stay away from alcohol, if you do all these things, if you know, you stay away from drugs, you stay away from all this stuff. If you do that stuff and you find positive ways, but you know that it's going to stay with you for a while.
And it does, and you know, it's not like it everybody's like, oh, well, I'm, you know, been doing it for so long that, you know, I don't feel adrenaline. Everybody feels adrenaline.
Yeah, you do.
And you know, when you hear guys start saying that, I'm like, oh, really? Well, maybe you need to go see the guy.
I think you can measure it over time, as in, but don't you agree? Don't you think it's this? It's not that you don't feel it. It's that you've been there before, so your body goes, "Oh yeah, it's coming."
The other thing, when you're a leader, you're thinking about a lot of other things, right? You know, and one of the things that, you know, I got this from a World War II guy. He said, when you get on the horn there, stop for a second, take a deep breath, and use a really calm voice, you know, and that's a really big thing. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a really
because
big
you
thing.
dictate the tempo of the whole operation at that point.
And I think in a lot of ways, I think it's harder for what you do because we got plenty of cameras out there. Everybody's an expert, and you know, and you got people screaming all over the place, and you know, you're looking at fields of fire. You can't just walk out there and start blazing away. I mean, and you know, I look at a lot of stuff now, and you know, the guy I really like, do you remember that guy? He's in Texas somewhere, and they put him in charge of security for the church, and somebody tried to steal something. He knocked that dude. He stretched that guy out with one round, and then he said
he killed the guy coming in the door, and he tried to kill everybody else. And
they said, he's just a regular guy. And he goes, well, I was practicing every day because I wanted to do a good job, and I was thinking, you're my hero. You're my hero. Yeah, it's great. But I think that today, I mean, the battlefield is fast. And it's a different battlefield now. You know,
absolutely.
When you look at it and you see what's going on.
But military is no different, because we all know that the satellite's watching you guys just like they're watching us.
Absolutely.
You know, here's one of the things I really believe in. I believe that the stress, the post-traumatic stress, I think when we give people guns and we train them and we tell them that, hey, your job is to protect life and do this thing. You know, I mean, I'll never forget, I was on probation. And when I got in my shooting, and one of my lieutenants called me and said, you realize you're not in trouble, right? And I said, I hope not.
Yeah.
You gave me a gun. So I think for the most part, people are okay. Like, I've been trained. I know what to do. I think the biggest thing that happens is leaders and people of influence say and do stupid things. Mm-hmm. And they create the problem. Yep. You know, one of the things that I think creates a huge problem is if someone gets involved in an event or someone comes back, are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you okay? And I'm like telling people, I'm like, stop doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stop asking them if they're okay. Yep. Now, if you see a physical symptom or they say something,
it's true.
That's okay.
It's true.
But don't lead with that. They're not broken.
Nope. And the other thing, you can put a flinch in somebody pretty easy with that, you know.
Good. How about good job? How about thank you?
Yep.
How about, hey, I'm here if you need me?
Absolutely.
That type of stuff, that goes well. But the you're okay thing, I think, is very
and that's
dangerous.
where, you know, like I was talking about, you know, kind of gallows humor. That's where a lot of guys, when you've been with them for a while, that really helps, you know. And like we had one of our guys, you know, I was just standing there watching. We had been in some pretty hot stuff, and this guy was like, man, they were really shooting. And one of the senior NCOs, he just said, and you got a big snot running out of your nose. And that totally, everybody.
Icebreaker.
Icebreaker. Yep. So I think those are good things.
So I will tell you this, though, and I know you can relate to this. I've been in some serious adrenaline situations, and I know you've been in way more than I have. But before we go to break, I will tell you this. Rescuing children.
Oh, yeah.
It had to be the biggest adrenaline high that I've ever had in my life. Yep. And we're going to talk about that and a couple other things when we come back. So let's take a quick break. If you haven't noticed lately, Cascade County is booming. And one of the places I depend on to get all my construction needs is Builder's First Choice. Whether you're a contractor or a do-it-yourselfer, Builder's First Choice has everything you need. Stop out and see their amazing staff for all your building supplies today. Are you looking to replace those floors in your home? Or maybe you're doing new construction? The place I trust is Contract Flooring Carpet One. This is a locally owned and operated business here in Great Falls, and they are committed to serving you and giving you the very best prices and the very best product and service. Go see Contract Flooring Carpet One today. The Double Barrel Cafe is all about you, the amazing people of Cascade County. With every purchase you make, they give back to our community. Every bite and sip fuels their mission. Let's make a positive change, one cup and one bite at a time, because the Double Barrel is not just a cafe, they're building a better community. When deciding who I would trust for the technology component of this podcast, the choice was simple: Information Systems of Montana. Whether purchasing products for business or when I had them build me a new MacBook to catch child predators, they delivered, creating a solution for my exact needs. Contact Information Systems of Montana today. Your health journey is as unique as you are. The Peak Great Falls has everything you need for your fitness journey. They are your partner in wellness, with a top-notch facility and expert staff and a very welcoming vibe. Locally owned, community-driven. Join them today. One of the best family-owned businesses in Great Falls is Schulte's Coffee House. They have amazing coffees, frozen yogurts. You can even stop in and fill up your car. They are a full-fledged convenience store and are world famous for their chicken and my wife's favorite, the Bosco sticks. Go check out Schulte's Coffee House today. If you're passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment like I am, one of the best places in all of Montana to go is Mitchell Supply. Jim and Tammy Mitchell have been running this gun store for decades. They're major supporters of the Second Amendment, and they're major supporters of our community, and obviously they're supporters of this podcast. For all your firearms needs, go check out Mitchell Supply today. Big thanks to our sponsors there, as we heard. So this is really cool, this project. So there's all those individuals you heard on there. They all bought advertising for this.
Yeah, you like that.
And then it all goes to our foundation.
That's fantastic.
So our Sheriff's Legacy Foundation. Right now we're in a big school safety project, making sure all of our schools are secure. We're super excited about that. Doing some crazy outside the box stuff to do that. And then it's just neat. This community is so cool. They'll do anything. We live in a very pro-military, pro-cop community.
You do.
And it is so refreshing.
Yep.
We don't deal with a lot of stuff. So before the break, I kind of talked about the fact that, rescuing children and everything. I mean, that was for me. I mean, I love being sheriff. This has been the greatest ride because I love the leadership aspect.
Yep.
And I like influencing others so that they go out and do great things and then watching them do the great things.
Yep.
But the single greatest thing, that was just my thing that I worked on was, internet crimes against children. I just loved that job.
Yeah. So, Jeannie spoke very highly of you, so I tell you, I
that's
agree.
Jeannie. That's Jeannie Parker.
Oh,
the retired Jeannie Parker. Yes,
the incredible.
She's not
Jeannie.
really retired.
No, the incredible Jeannie. So when I came to Montana, I'd come out here in the '70s, and I really like what I saw. But like I said before, I told my wife and kids were like, I remember my son go, "Dad, you have no credibility in this house. You're never here. You come in and you go, why are you doing it like this?" So I told my wife Janet, I said, we can go anywhere you want to go. So my wife did 30 years in the Navy, Naval Academy grad, All-American runner. Yeah, she did all this stuff. So she was working in the Pentagon, and I had already come out here. And when I retired, I'm doing like everybody else. I'm going to be a contractor. I just take a uniform off. I do the same kind of thing. I was going overseas, coming back. So anyway, she said, "Hey, I'm ready to pull the trigger on Montana," and we did. But she had to finish up to get her 30, which she did. And she's a lot smarter. We have very different careers. She's a lot smarter than I am. So when I was out here, my friend Joe Coco, he said, "Hey, listen, we have a gap at a classical Christian school." And I said, "What do you mean a gap?" And he said, "Well, the headmaster is, he had to leave." And he said, "Could you take over for a little while?" And I said, "Joe, you do realize I was in a reform school when I was a kid, right?" And so anyway, I said, "Well, how about if I went until, we got out of financial trouble," which, and I really loved it. I mean, it was fun, but I am no academic guy. And there was a lot of teachers, I think, that were like, "Who is this guy?"
Right.
So anyway, a gal who was a teacher there, she said, "Hey, my husband's he's a cop in Whitefish," and he said, "You should meet Gene Parker." Mm-hmm. And so I was like, "Okay, who's Gene Parker?" And we met over at the hospital, and she was looking at me, and she wanted help, and Jess, how many cases,
Oh, yeah.
You had them as well, right?
Yeah.
So, Jeannie, she's just this super cool, but I mean, like leather tough gal.
Oh, super tough.
And
alpha female to the hill.
Just awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, just awesome. So she said, "Hey, we need to get on top of the runaways," because we were like last in Montana, and a lot of the kids were coming off the res and stuff like that. And I went, so Jeannie showed me a lot of stuff, and the ICAC thing, it'd just rip you. It just just I don't know how sometimes people stay as long as they do. Like one of the guys I work with, he's been there for quite a while, Ben Mum. He's just an outstanding person. And, I'm in there with him, but I'm looking for runaways, and I mean, that meets a lot of my skills as tracking them, you know, and doing all that. But it's a super scary thing. And I was thinking, you know, and I remember seeing you in there. I remember you had like these huge piles. And then a couple days later, there was a kid who had run from here, and I talked to your wife.
Yeah.
Chris, she's like, well, if you can get him back here, that would be great. And I said, I'll get him back here for you.
But because she got signed to juvenile parole at that time.
She sure did.
Yeah.
She sure did.
Yeah.
And so, I think that to me, the scariest thing that I see is that, you know, and I've been doing this now for quite a while. And, you know, when I left Whitefish Christian Academy, I said, you know, this is more what I want, you know, what I'm good at doing. And I ranged pretty far. You know, I've been a lot of different places, but it is scary. You know, you watch how they groom those kids they groom these communities. You know, well, how could Larry ever? He would never do that. And then you watch these young kids, and you know, and then you add the drugs in, and they're gone.
Well, the thing that's you know, we return. You want to call it? I call it being unpolitically correct. We don't call them runaways anymore. We call them all missing persons cases.
That's what they are.
And the reason why is because the kids that run away, they're coming from sometimes a broken home, or they're being sexually abused. So they run from that environment. Well, the predators know that.
They do.
And they just wait for them, and they grab them up, and you know they
got a very good operational mode. The predators. They do. And you know, when you see them, and I think technology and certainly the justice system hasn't caught up with, because you know, some of those people, I'm like,
not even close.
I know what I would do with them.
Yeah, not even close.
And when you see those things, and you're seeing them a lot, and that's where Jeannie, you know, Jeannie Scott is semi-retired now, but you know, I just used to watch her, you know, and I'd be like, you know, I just can't believe what she's handling, you know, and I got pretty motivated about it, and I like working, you know, I like working with the deputies, which is a lot of fun, and you know, but it's such a serious thing that when you tell people, and you know, sometimes I tell parents, you know, because they got to go through this process. Those kids are going to get drug tested, and they're like, well, you know, what do you think? And I said, how come that kid's got like 7 TikTok things on his phone? And, you know, why do you let him do that? Or a kid goes missing, and I'm not pinging on parents, but it's the truth. And first thing I'll say is, okay, when was the last time you saw him? Who are his friends? And they'll just look at you with their mouth hanging open. I said, they're friends. Who are their friends?
Yeah, we don't know.
Some guy named Bill or something like that. I'm like, great, isn't that great? Boy, I got a lot to go on. But when you see, and then the res is different.
Totally different animal.
Different.
You know, one of the things that's super frustrating, and one of the things we're seeing is these kids are using these devices. They're meeting people.
Oh yeah.
They're at risk.
Oh yeah.
And they're meeting people because they're going to give them free drugs.
Oh, big time.
Free. Nothing's free, right? There's definitely going to be a trade.
It's a hook.
Yeah,
it's a good hook.
And then when they leave the house, they leave the phone because they know that we can track them on the phone.
Absolutely.
And so it's super frustrating. And it's one of those things we got to take super seriously. Now you're a reserve deputy, right?
I am.
For the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. And you've been doing this at least a decade, haven't you?
Let's say I've been doing it since 2016. So yeah, it's coming up on
coming up on a decade.
And you know, and the thing you find, you know, and then for a while, you know, particularly when my dogs are around, both my dogs, you know, had passed on. And I talk about dogs all day too, Jesse.
Yeah, I know.
Sure.
We'll do a follow-up one on dogs.
So you know, I'm telling you that because, you know, when I had, you know, particularly Kitty, she, you know, I'd known her forever. She saved my life in combat. And, you know, she was just, you know, better than everyone. And what was great, you know, is when I would, you know, get a kid and, you know, I'd be waiting for the deputy. She had that ability. Malin will have that ability to not blink. And she'd just stare at those kids, you know, and these kids would be like, you're not going to let that dog go on me. I said, you just sit right there. You sit right over there. But I think, Jesse, I think that the scariest thing for me now is the fact that it is such a good, and you watch people pouring across the border. You can't stop them. We're not even looking at the north. We're not even looking at the north.
No.
And you know, like where we're right now, you got, and I don't mean this derogatory because I have a lot of good people that I know on the flat. You have the stuff that runs from the res. It runs right here. There's plenty of places to hide things, and then you got kids that feel like I want to see some action,
right?
And they're going to see it real quick.
Yep.
And so it's one of the scariest things. You know, I was telling one of my sisters. You know, she's like, "Well, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, you do." But so I told you earlier about that little girl Isabella, and one of the things that, you know, sometimes when I wake up in the morning, it's not exactly what I feel like doing, is getting up and, you know, because I'm supposed to be retired, right? So,
yeah, but a man's got to have purpose.
Absolutely, and I think about Izzy, and I'm thinking if that was her that was missing, I would already been up. I would already been up. So you just get going. But I think the ICAC program is a great program. I think that for law enforcement officers, I think it's very, very hard because they like to be out moving, and when you're on the box in there looking at that stuff, there's nowhere for you to go.
See, I moved a lot.
I know you did.
I hustled, and I didn't, but I did it different. In fact, I was sometimes criticized a little bit for my kind of unconventional way I did it, but we had a lot of success. You know, and you had to get outside the box. You had to do stuff a little different. If you do it the conventional way, I think you're wrong.
I agree.
And I think you're going to give yourself a lot of misery.
I agree.
You got to beat the street.
You do.
Know, we did live undercover operations. I did a bunch with Jeannie.
Yeah.
We had so many great successes. I mean, and we arrested some. I mean, I remember one time arresting a retired San Bernardino deputy.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Jeannie, in up where we were, one of the first things that I did with her, she went into one of the hotels, and there were some people of note in there, and she made no bones to hide it or anything, and so a lot of people went to her, and you know, Jeannie was a lot going on under that blonde hair. Oh yeah, and she would just look at him, you know, and she said, they said, well, why did you have to put everybody's name in the paper? She goes, I wanted everybody to know that we're coming.
Oh, yeah.
That we're coming.
Yeah, we did the same thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
We always put their names in the paper. Absolutely. Because that's the deterrent.
It is.
You know, there's I mean, we're gonna try to put you away for the rest of your life. And then we're gonna publicly shame you for doing it.
Absolutely.
So this is done.
And it is, you know, you look all over the place and you know, Center for Missing and Exploited Children, you know, and then you've got, and then I'm going to put this in because at first I had nothing good to say about them, but, you know, and the child services people, fantastic. And in a no-win
job.
You know, and I mean, you just, and I would watch these young kids come out of college, you know, because like you, I've been doing it a while, and they're like, Colonel Bristol, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And then you would watch them. And I remember this one gal, I'm not going to say her name. She was just so fired up. And then I saw her one day, and I hadn't seen her in a while. And she just, like, she came up, put her head on my shoulder, and she goes, I know you must hate me. I said, go live your life. Go live your life. You know, she had everything you wanted to do. So
when I married my wife, she was a social worker. And she had proud social worker on her license plate.
Your wife's super tough.
She was going to do it forever. And
She's
then, but this was her out. Her out was she was going to go carry a gun and chase down offenders. But I mean, the social work job's so hard that my wife was like, it was easier to go carry a gun and chase offenders around.
I agree with her.
Than it was to deal with all this tragic stuff.
And you know, because with the social workers, what I feel bad is, and you watch the parents, they glaze over right away. You know, they're fighting to keep their kid in there.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, okay. And they go, they pull out this big thing. They go, here's our plan. Now we're going to do this and this and this.
It's terrifying too.
And you just watch them; they're all glazing over. It's tough.
Well, and if they've got addiction, or if they didn't get greatest education, they could barely keep up with that.
No, that's true.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. a lot of children need to be removed from a home for safety, but there's like you said, there's no winning.
And the COVID thing, a guy that I really respect, he said, if you had a little crack in your family when COVID started, your family imploded or exploded. And he said for kids, they wanted time, particularly teenage kids, to get out, but there was no place to go, so they run.
Yeah,
so they run.
Yeah, and then it was a golden opportunity for people who wanted to do covert things on the internet.
No question.
Because those kids were not only were they encouraged to have access, the schools were requiring it.
Yep.
And I mean, COVID was single-handedly the worst thing that ever happened to our country.
I agree.
Ever.
And I watched a couple of parents. I get together with some parents if they ask, like to do a follow-up with them. Jeannie, that was one of Jeannie's things. And so they asked me, they said, have you seen the movie The Sound of Freedom? Yeah, and it's a great movie, but it's a Hollywood a good one.
It is a good one, but I agree with you. There's a Hollywood in there.
So it's like Tom Cruise flying in that plane, upside down and everything.
Yeah. I mean, he's in the back seat. It's close. It's as close as you're going to get.
Absolutely. But I think that it is a scary thing, and I tell parents all the time. Once again, I go back to that movie Wind River. There's that one scene, and he said, "You might be having kids of your own someday." And he's talking to that girl. And what I love about that movie, they're both under pressure. There's no time to fall in love in 10 minutes, And she's tough, and he's tough. And he said, you got to watch your kids every minute. You got to watch them every minute. And I'm going to tell you one thing, another thing just about my mom, because my mom's been gone a long time now, but when I was first born, she and the biological male there, they were in Washington D.C. He was in Georgetown Law School, and so they were living in Arlington, Virginia, in a 5th floor apartment with me. I was the first one. So my mom was down in the laundry, which was 5 floors down, hot, no air conditioning, and I'm crawling around like a little carpet pisser at the time,
Right.
And so anyway, my mom, and she, I still think about this to this day. She said she looked up and there was a huge guy. He was black, but that it wouldn't matter what. And he said, "I want some water." That's what he said. And my mother, she's looking down on me going like, "You're going to embarrass me here." And she said, at first, I was hot. I wanted to finish the laundry. I had other things I had to do. And she said, "Oh, well, I don't really know if we have any water in here, but there's something right out over there." And she pointed, and all of a sudden the guy looked at her and he said, "Lady, I want some water." And my mother said, all of a sudden, she felt it like coming right up her arm. And she was looking at me. And my mom used to always say, I was picked last for sports. My mother was good at everything she did. But she said, I pointed and I said, "Maybe it's right over there." The guy looked and she went, scooped me up, and then she ran 5 flights up. And when she got inside, she said she was just breathing really hard. And she said, and all of a sudden she felt really foolish. She goes, the poor guy, he's probably working outside. He wanted a drink of water, and what a fool I've made of myself. And she wouldn't go back down there. And then she and a friend of hers went down, and her laundry was still there, and the guy was gone. 2 days later, in that paper, that guy had been going into buildings and raping and killing women.
Holy cow.
And so my mom's, and so I said, "Well, Mom, sum that up for me." And she said, "If you feel threatened, you are." And,
absolutely.
And that's, you tell kids that, you tell your own kids that, and just what I tell parents during the follow-ups all the time is I say, you know what? Sometime you're going to be at a beach or you're going to be in a building, and your kid's going to be out of your sight for a minute. And your adrenaline's going to go bang, it's going to spike. And think about what that would feel like if that was the start of like, you're never going to see that kid again.
Yeah.
So, leash them, do whatever you want. And that movie Wind River, I like people to watch that. I recommend it to
Yeah,
them. It's a great movie.
Great
too.
movie.
Plus, old boy can stroke that gun too.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that part. Well, it's got everything.
it does.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like where you are right now, there's a lot of places in Montana that have multi avenues, and you got a lot of them here.
Oh yeah, we have we got one of our detectives, Justin Cambick, and his actual thing is he works missing and murdered Indigenous people, and he uses this kind of you've heard of CalTOPO mapping. He uses that, and he's got like a formula, and he does all the behavior of lost persons. I mean, he reads all the books. He does all that.
Those are good books. They're good books.
Yeah, and he's actually been called several times to reservations and had good success. I mean, some of these things have been suicides and different things like that, but I mean, we believe in it a lot, and we think, with now that the Little Shell tribe is here. We have the largest urban tribe, I think, in America, because we're like the only one that their tribe is our community. And so what we can see is it can probably be a huge uptick in this type of stuff, and we need to get ahead of it.
And I got to put a plug in. Misty LaPlante's one of the investigators. Man, she's awesome. I mean,
absolutely.
We went to a course together, and she's it. And for a while, she was on that task force with the AG, and then she said, "I'm going back to the res to do it." She was a glacier. She was and I'll tell you, she's one of those people. She's a straight shooter, and her kids. Like I watch her and her husband. Sometimes I like them both, and I just watch her with them, and she's got that kind of look, like you're never going to be out of my sight.
Absolutely.
And I mean, but it's super scary. And that, like the border, when you go to the border, like when I first went down there, I thought, oh, what a great thing I'm doing. I'm helping the Border Patrol guys track and everything. And it's great. And when you find something, you're like, okay, Kitty, my dog Kitty was really up. And then Maddie, the one who followed her, same thing. We'd slow some people down with those dogs. But you start thinking, people are coming. Coming. And like I said, I'm not, this is America, but it's a tough America. It's a tough America, Jesse.
No, it is. It is. I mean, there's, I look at what's happening with our southern border, and our federal government isn't working for us.
No.
And here's what scares me, and tell me if this is my paranoia.
Okay.
I look at the war in Ukraine, and I look at now possibly a war in Israel and everything that's kicking off. And I look at our president, who I'm not convinced is all there. And I do believe there's a deep state, and I believe there's people that are running him.
I'm with you.
And I mean, I'll tell you why I believe all common logic tells you that southern border should be shut down. Okay, it's just common logic. It's not about being compassionate or anything like that. In fact, we're being less compassionate by having it open. So I recently get audited by the Office of Detention Oversight.
Okay.
And they ding me on all these issues, don't track your chemicals properly, all this stupid federal regulation stuff. And I'm like, okay. And this is for us to hold ICE. So the people who we arrest at the border, this for us to hold them, okay? And they're dinging us, and I'm like, okay, but we just passed the ICE audit.
Yeah.
The actual people came in, and we're good. And I'm like, I have it.
People that know about these
right,
things,
and it's
too.
like pass. Well, Congress passed this new law, and we have to check on all this. So I started calling around Montana, and all the sheriffs I talked to have dumped ICE because of this audit and because of all their rules. And I'm like the last one left. And they treated me terrible. And then on top of that, I won't get into it a lot, but they basically said they weren't going to necessarily be honest in their report. And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, my undersheriff lost his mind. And so they do all this. And so I'm like, well, what if I just dump you? And they're like, well, you'd be like all the others. And they didn't seem to care. So here's what bothered me about that. You've got all this influx of all these illegals coming in, and then you've got this oversight group that are coming in, And it's just the sheriffs are going, well, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. Well, guess what? The next thing you know, they're going to turn around and go, well, we'd like to arrest people, but there's no place to hold them.
Exactly.
And I'm going, this is terrifying. So, I mean, I look at this, the way that the world's working and the way it's spinning right now. And one of my big fears is with the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel, I see a draft coming in the future. I see escalation of this. And here's what I'm scared about. They're going to take all military-age men out of the United States. And then they're going to enlist policies of taking away our liberty.
Sure.
You know? And there's going to be nobody of military age that they're afraid of. And that stuff, I mean...
Yeah, and when you look
terrifying.
You know, for me, like I'm pretty simple about a lot of this stuff. So I was thinking, you know, this is what, you know, I fought for, you know, this is what I bled for. This is what, I'm not saying I did any more than anybody else. That's not what I'm saying. And, you know, I got a lot of, you know, you talk to a lot of older guys that served, and they're like, is this really happening? Is this really, you know, are we really doing more?
Is this what we fought for?
Diversity training than we are, you know? And I said, hey, look, you know, I want to believe that we got to have a leader somewhere, you know, that's going to come and help us make it right. And so I think that people that want to serve, that can put the country and people ahead of themselves and their personal ambition. And, you know, you got to have ambition to do that and everything. But right now, I mean, like I watched Bagram. That's my generation, okay?
Right.
You know, that base was a lot more than, you know, I wasn't really just there to fight Afghanistan war. We did a lot of things in that base. And all of a sudden it's gone. And now we're blind in a lot of places.
Well, and then the other question, not only blind, but how do we get other countries to trust us now?
Yeah, there you go.
How do we go into a country and have special operations guys like you?
Absolutely.
And you need the local resources. You need the local talent. You need the local people to tell you what to do, where to go. They just watch what happened in Afghanistan, and they're going to give us the middle finger.
Exactly. And you look at, you know, I look at our young guys today. I mean, you know, you look like I teach a couple of things at, you know, at Camp Lejeune and Camp Pendleton, and you know, I go in there with those guys, and you know, they're like, sir, what do you think about all this? And I said, I think it's your time. And and I feel sometimes like, what a cop out. You know, I'm not even. I should be telling them, you know, it sucks. Everything about it sucks. But I think people got to stand. You know, people got to stand on bigger beliefs than, you know, electric cars. You know?
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
I'm like, you know, you're killing me. Although the big thing I always have with electric cars, I got to tell you this, when I'm going down 90, I've been all over the place. I remember the first time I went to Big Timber, which I thought, what a cool name. They had those things. The
stations.
And I went in there and I said, what are those things? And the guy goes, you know, like, he goes, yeah, you know, the guy said someday we're going to have these electric cars. We're just waiting for them. And so one of our neighbors, they have an electric car, and they were trying to tell me to buy one for my wife. That isn't going to happen. And so I just said, you know, when you take a trip, make sure you go through Big Timber so you can recharge.
So you can maybe recharge. But the other thing too is, like, I mean, until China, Russia, and India stop all their pollution, we're just a microscopic amount of theirs. It's absurd.
So Jesse, I'm going to tell you one thing that I do that makes me feel really good. So some years ago, I decided, you know, I like, I'm from New England, you know, big logging tradition there and all that. But I started, I watched a couple guys filing these crosscut saws, okay? And so I started doing it. It's really hard. It's and you know, some of those saws are like 100 plus years old. That's probably like one of the places that I go just to kind of unwind. It's very difficult. The tools are old, the saws are old, but you know, with these trail life boys that I got, they're like, Colonel Bristol, like, how old is this saw? I said, older than you. So I think you got to find, and my hope for law enforcement, why do I train a lot of law enforcement to be able to protect themselves? Because they are the best target out there for some of these jackasses.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's
and there's a couple things I think they're going to do. Is one is they're going to bait us, and they're going to try to get the public to turn on us through their fighting. And if they can't win that fight, then eventually they're just going to take us on.
They are.
So it's. I think there's hard days coming.
Yep.
And I think those soft men are going to have to become hard.
Yeah,
really fast.
that's a good. A good thing. And you just look and I remember I saw in Afghanistan one time they had deserted this baby, and the baby was lying there fighting, like scrapping, and we picked it up, we brought it back, and that's what we got to be now. I like to go to a lot of movies, so one of the movies that I've seen that I really have enjoyed over the years is The Last of the Mohicans. It's one of those movies. It starts kind of slow, but there's a scene in there where, Madeline Stowe, not with all respect to my wife, not the homeliest woman I've ever seen. And so, she's kind of fallen for Daniel Day-Lewis, who's like super cool, woodsman. But, the British guy, who's a brave guy in his own way, he says, who are these colonists that go without so much as a by your leave? And she turns on him, and she's just magnificent. She said, they don't live their life by your leave. They hack it out of the wilderness, and they bear their children along the way. So at the end of that movie, Jesse, and this has got to happen. It's got to happen. So, he goes through tough things. He loses his brother. She loses her sister. And they're standing there with the old guy, Chingach Cook, who, by the way, is Russell Means, the greatest Indian activist of all time. But anyway, they're standing there, and they're all just beautiful. And I'm thinking, that's 1757. By the time the Revolutionary War comes, the ducks that they've pumped out are going to be fighting that war. And so I think that maybe a little less talk about, counterculture and all that kind of stuff, and maybe a little more, maybe some people need to come to Montana,
Absolutely.
That's what I'm going to say.
I agree.
That's what I'm going to say.
So before we close out, I want to talk about Benghazi.
Yeah, sure.
And I know there's NDAs and classified documents.
Thanks.
So
Thank you.
we won't go anywhere we're not supposed to go.
Yep.
So you are if I remember correctly, your title was your Special Operations Command.
Yeah, and I was the Joint Special Operations Task Force Commander.
So you're the JSOC guy for the thing.
Yeah, so I had 12 countries. I was responsible for 12 countries. People always tell you, I've got a big area of operations. Mine the size of the continental United States. So 180.
Where are you based out of?
So the back end of our thing was in Germany, and the front end we were in either, in several different places in the embassies. So I got people in all the embassies. A lot of travel, a lot of work. I had fantastic people. I was ruthless to get that job because I'd been in Africa a couple of times, and I was glad I did. I was lucky. I was working for an admiral. He and I were in Bosnia together for a year together. We know everything about each other. So in North Africa and Western Africa, and there was a lot of bad things happening there. Coup d'etat is the big thing. In a lot of these countries, they're dirt poor. A lot of ISIS in there. So when we have this long thing with Libya, Gaddafi, and then all of a sudden, Gaddafi's dead. So this thing like the one sometimes keep him alive because you kind of know what he's doing.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to say right off the bat, just so I can get it out, we responded. If you ever hear anything about how we didn't respond, that's, from the guys that were there was a lot of tremendous heroism on that. And, I can't say too much about that. It'll come out someday. I was not happy with, the interagency work there. The guy who was the ambassador who was killed, he was a really cool guy. I mean, he was kind of goofy, to be honest with you, but he'd go running with the Marines when they were there. But in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, he he was kind of a true believer. You know, he kind of believed like, well, you know, I'm here from the State Department and they're going to believe what I'm saying. You know, countries like that, it's law of the gun, law of the gun. So as it started, you know, we had other things going on. Because you have a lot of countries. And, you know, it started rolling towards, you know, 9/11, you know, the 9/11 anniversary.
Yep.
So it was, you know, pretty quiet, but we were looking for it. We had sort of said, you know, and so now I'm just giving, this is me as a retired guy. I know I can say this because it's not, I think Romney had Obama beat down the stretch. You know, he was giving him a lot, you know, and then this thing came up, you know, because that administration had said, you know, we got control of that. And we asked many times to put people in, many times. And the president, and it's his call. It is his call. And Admiral McCraven, who was the head of SOCOM, you know, he said, okay, he made his call. And I respect that. You know, I was one of the guys saying, we gotta get in there, we gotta get in there. And I was going in there and it was just that, you know, and I told the ambassador one time, Ambassador Stevens, like I said, he was a very nice guy. And he said, you know, you're kind of jaded by a lot of combat. I said, show me somebody here that wouldn't shoot you for that tie clip that you have on. That's what I told him that. And I felt terrible, you know, that happened to him. But it's a classic example of when you need what we needed there was a certain type on the ground that could change some of the population, either make them fear what we can do. And so when that went, Jesse, it was like, you know, there was some incredible stuff that was done there, or a lot more people would have died. But it showed you what can happen when disparate groups, and I had seen this in Somalia with the Black Hawk Down thing. You know, I mean, we were like, you know, I was there for quite a while, and we were kind of, we got this, you know, and then all of a sudden, every time I hear that song by Phil Collins, I can feel it coming in the air. That's just what it reminds me of. But the thing that made Benghazi, once again, and it's not my job to be political. And you know, my last day on active duty, I testified in Congress. That was not the way I felt like ending my you know, military career. But there was, you know, we should have done this, we should have done that. You know, the Secretary of State there, she said, you know, oh, well, what does it matter now? Well, it matters quite a bit, madam, you know, in my opinion. But what I think it gave people, when we show that we, the United States, when we show that we can't handle something, you know, there are unreal expectations for us, you know?
Absolutely.
You know, and like there is, you know, you are the sheriff of Cascade County. You know, people aren't going to say, well, oh, you had an off day. They're like, this is your job. And they don't know anything about what that job is, right?
Absolutely.
And so I was answering a lot of questions, you know, and I mean, my wife and kids were very upset. You know, all of a sudden, my son said, Dad, you're on Bill O'Reilly. And they're like, who's this guy, Colonel Bristol, who said he's not talking? And, you know, what I said, and it was probably not the best thing I ever said. One of these gals was there, and she was out in front of our house, and she said, you know, this is an important story, and, you know, you need to tell it. This is the most important thing. I said, lady, the most important thing happening right now is, I said, get the hell off my lawn. And you know, but when it goes like that, and a lot of these countries, when they see something and they see a chink in the armor,
they're taking it.
They're going to take it.
Well, they don't have anything to lose.
No, and so like right now, you know, and so it goes to this day. You know, we have a country, Iran, that is the king of state-sponsored terrorism. They pay big bucks to not just Hezbollah, you know, they pay big bucks, not just to Hamas. They pay big bucks to a lot of people. And they got a great train. It's like gun sight for terrorists, right?
Right.
And so what was happening in Libya is when Gaddafi was there, he was, you know, people kind of say he's kind of like a bumpkin and everything, but we had we had a very clear picture of who he was and what would trip his trigger. And a lot of it, I think President Obama was pretty good at this, was with the drones and stuff like that. But when I think back to those days, it was just, I kept thinking, like, how could we have been kept out of there? We're supposedly the finest special operations force in the world. We are the finest special. And I said, I can put 132 guys in there right now. He said, well, you can put a lot less than that. And then all of a sudden, you just can only stretch it so far. Now, I'm not being Mr. Positive, but I got to say a couple good things. One, tremendous individual heroism, and it will come out someday. And when it does, people will see what individuals can do who are well-trained and have the will to win. The other piece is we have this unit in the Marine Corps, the security forces, and they are young kids right out of boot camp, and they are just, what they know how to do is pretty good shooting, pretty good. Not MARSOC, but they are pretty good shooters. One of the coolest things was after that, we call those guys in right away, up to where we had to patch up in Tripoli and where we had to patch up at Benghazi. And all these guys come walking off the plane. And, I went to meet them there. And these are young Marines. And they were all wearing, and, you can buy 511 gear in any cool store, but they're all walking down with these 511 shirts and the cargo pants, right? So this one kid comes up to me and he goes, "You're Colonel Bristol, right?" I said, "I am." And he said, "Sir, I just want you to know that I'm Sergeant," and I can't remember his last name. And he just said, "And I'm in charge of this." And I said, "I bet you are." And he said, "Sir, and we're authorized to wear this kind of stuff." And I remember I was just looking at him and I said, "You look great. I mean, you really look great." And we had a guy, he was a Marine, pretty senior guy who was doing something else. And I said, "You're going to go talk to those Marines right now." And so this guy, he looks just like you, Jesse. He had a beard and he was just doing his thing. So he went over there, and this guy, he's been doing a lot of special operations for a while. And, he kind of, "I don't do that anymore," and I said, "Get over there." And in about 10 minutes, he was like a drill instructor. He goes, "I am gunnery sergeant. I got." And so he was doing it. So then the next day we're walking around because there was definitely some threat. And I came to that same sergeant and he said, "Sir, you want to know what's really cool?" And I said, What's really cool?" He goes, "The gunny," he said, "when it's just us and him, we can call him by his first name." And I thought, man, so when people tell me there are no heroes anymore,
Right.
Those guys are heroes. And Jess, they didn't have anything special. They didn't have the coolest sight, and they didn't have, they had long guns. They had M16 long guns, and you know what? They would have killed anything that came in there.
Yeah.
But it was something like a black eye, like Benghazi's a black eye, like Bagram is a black eye, and we're not the nation that we can't lose one. We can't lose one. And guys ask me a lot about what happened in Somalia. We won that fight. I mean,
Yeah.
people tell, "Oh, yeah." I'm like, "I'll tell you because I was there, buddy." But what happened? President Clinton made a tough decision. He didn't get us in. He didn't get us in there. Old President Bush did, but he said we're out. And I'll tell you, you talk about what happens to these things. So we found this out years later, and it's now public knowledge. We were being looked at, by a lot of radical Muslims, and they said, if you punch the United States in the face, they'll quit. And that's how 9/11 got going.
Right.
And so when we see this stuff, we are a nation that is developed because of the American dream, but because we have a military and law enforcement that enforce order
Yeah.
outward and much. And so when that thing is damaged, we got to come back. And that's why, and I don't know if Ukraine is our fight. I don't know. The Israelis and the Pakistanis, they're going to go just fine. And I think President Biden, he said, hey, this is one thing, Iran's another. Yeah, Iran without $11 billion.
Yeah.
That's my thought with that one.
Yeah, exactly.
By a lot of 30-30s, Jesse.
Yeah, a lot of 30-30s.
So anyway,
yes.
And now I'm gonna I'll get off my pulpit there. But that
No, it's perfect.
But when you look at that stuff, and when you go back in the U.S. military tradition, the guy I always like to look at, there are a lot of cool guys, but George Washington, he's in that same war that was Last of the Mohicans. Got his ass kicked all over the place. He was a Brit, fighting for the Brits. Got his ass kicked. Just wants to go to Mount Vernon and plant cherry trees or whatever. So all of a sudden we're bowing up. They say, hey, you got to lead us. And he said, I'm not qualified to lead you. He does not take a salary. He does not take a salary. He writes his expenses down, but he does not take a salary. Then he's done. They said, we want you to be the king. He said, hey, we just got rid of the king.
Yeah.
They said, well, we want you to be something. And he did that. And when you look at a guy like Washington, you say, like, okay, we got plenty of guys like that.
Absolutely.
I've worked with all these heroes, and they're incredible. Admiral McRaven, incredible guy. When the big shoot came, when the big shoot, we're gonna kill bin Laden. All I heard from Admiral McRaven was President Obama. That's President Obama, and he's right, because the president is to say yes or no.
Absolutely.
But that's how it's supposed to work, Jess. That's how it's supposed to work.
So, how many times in your career have politics interfered, or have politicians not listened to the guys on the ground? I mean, have you lost count?
Yeah, and what's frustrating? So, I always think about this. I've had both hips replaced, and the guy that did it for me is a doctor named Bergman, and I was pretty chewed up, and I don't like to go to the doctor. And so when he looked at my hips, and he's over in Kalispell right now, and he's a great guy, but like a lot of surgeons, he's pretty cocky. I'm gonna tell you. So he said, Colonel Bristol, you're supposed to be some legendary tough guy. He goes, you're not that smart. Like, look at this thing. Look at your hips. Look what's happened to him. And I said, are you going to help me or not? And so he said, yeah, I'm going to help you. So then, I got them both replaced, and he was looking, and he said, I might have to go back in. I said, oh, Joe, I feel great. And he goes, Colonel Bristol, if I was going to talk about going into a building and shooting something, I would listen to you with rapt attention. You do the same thing for me. So what I think with politicians, I don't want to hear too much advice on how to do the ABCs of attacking a strong point or something like that. What I want from them, if it's voted that we're going, you back us right down the line. And 9/11 is a good example of that.
Absolutely.
Guys are, because, and you're right, what you said a little while ago, I'm worried now, who would want to send their kid after what you saw in Bagram? In Bagram, who would want to send your kid? And who would say, like, what the hell are we doing? And so, is it our war? Is it not our war? We're talking about nuclear stuff. I heard Condoleezza Rice on, and she's a very smart lady. She said, I think people should, in Congress, should start thinking, yeah, maybe Iran is not listening to us. She said, I think we've told people that once or twice. So, you stand on this thing, and you're thinking, you can do everything right, Jesse, in Cascade County, and some kid that that grew up there raised his hand, did just what you did, and kids are going to die. People are going to die on a battlefield. There's no question. They're law enforcement officers, and I hope they never do. But what you want to believe is that somebody sent you in there with your back. Like, right. I got your back.
Absolutely.
And I don't. I'm retired now, but I don't always feel like.
Well, but isn't there also a sense too that if they listen to you and you force multiply, maybe nothing happens.
Yeah. No,
You know, I mean, you get peace through superior firepower.
Sure you do. Sure you do.
And you don't have to, you know,
Yep.
put kids on a plane
No.
with American flags over them and that terrible thing.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's always, if there's ever an opportunity where you can win a fight just by sheer presence,
No question.
you always do that.
And that's
like
a
Sun Tzu Art of War
absolutely
staple principle.
You know what's scary? So when I was in high school, a guy used to come sometimes and watch me play, and his name was Samuel Griffith. He was a retired Marine general, and he's a Raider in World War II. And so he gave me this book, and it was his translation of Sun Tzu's Art of War. I wasn't in the Marine Corps. I was like, great. I chucked it in a box. And so some years later, I read this thing. And General Griffith, he had seen a lot in war. He wrote the quintessential book on Guadalcanal. He was in the Battle of Guadalcanal. And just an amazing guy. And so as he was translating this thing, it said Sun Tzu back in, whatever, 1,000,000 BC. He said, if you do this right, you'll take the enemy without firing a shot.
Absolutely.
You will not need to siege because you will have it all. And so I have that book now. I teach a class now in Campbell's Unit. The guy who runs our class, a really smart guy. And I said, can I put this on a slide? And he looked at it. He goes, oh my God. He goes, when was that written? So, and that's what the Chinese are doing.
Read it. I just
to
got
us.
it. Yeah.
To us.
Just read it, because I just started listening to it myself on on Audible, and very affordable and really worth it.
Very cool
Very
headed
cool.
guy too. And that's what they're doing. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people like, I want things American made, but the Chinese make it better and they make it cheaper.
Absolutely.
And so people are going to buy Chinese, and we're feeding right in. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's
it's
kind of where we are.
Oh, it is. No, it is for sure. Before we close out, one thing I wanted to say to you, Colonel, one of my favorite observations about this whole thing is, 38 years in the United States military, growing up tough, having all these things. You were probably one of the most optimistic people I've ever had on. Everything that you say, you're driving it towards this optimistic goal. And there was about 4 or 5 other questions I was going to ask you, and I didn't ask them because I got it from your optimism. I already know the answer.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you questions like, do you think this country could be saved? Do you think? And I already know the answer to what you think, all that.
Yep.
And you absolutely do believe in it, and you do believe in us, and you definitely believe in your community, and I know you believe in my community because you've come down, you've taught classes, and you take care of us, and we just really appreciate you, and God bless you, man, and thanks for coming on.
I appreciate that. And if I could, one of my guys today, who's a good friend of mine, so some years ago, they were like, can't you write something cool? Can't you write something cool? And so I'll just close with this, if that's okay, if you have the time. So, and it's called The Men of the Forward Shadow. So the forward shadow, recon always feels like they're the forward shadow, before nobody can stretch any farther than we can go. So it goes like this: long they go and far away, but where they've gone they never say, but dangerous games they go to play, the men of the forward shadow. You'll see them in the streets or down the hall, a tall Marine standing even tall. He'll smile, salute, but that's all, for his is a dangerous business. Jump wings and scuba bubble will adorn his chest. You hear it told that he's the best, but a mystery surrounds the rest of the men of the forward shadow. Stand up, hook up, don't be slow. A light turns green and out you go to the earth 1,000 feet below as you parachute to danger. That air so quiet, not a sound. The chute above you, square or round. But what awaits them on the ground? The men of the forward shadow. The water's dark and the tide's still high. 2,000 more before you hit feet dry. Ghosts flash across the beach against a moonless sky. Ghostly men of the forward shadow. And while lesser men lay in their bed. A silent patrol is stealthily led that will go where the angels fear to tread, go the men of the forward shadow. Deployments come around again, and we need you, brother, so you extend, where it's never if you go, just when, that's life in a recon battalion. The world takes you from place to place, jungle, desert, even space, and you fight and strain to keep the pace, to stay in the forward shadow. And someday a ship's bell rings and a piper blows. You'll sheath that sword and salute and go. But deep inside this you know, you're a part of the forward shadow. And a world grows soft before our eyes. Destruction, greed, compromise, while enemies flourish behind those lies, and who can the nation turn to? In brightest day or blackest night, they must turn to those with more vigilant sight. So to those who worship evil's might, fear those men of the forward shadow. And so to those who I speak to in this hall, if you hear me, if at all, when the nation demands the ultimate call, first will go a forward shadow, and long ago and far away, still they go, but never say. In dangerous games they go to play, the men of the forward shadow. Long they go and far away, where they've gone they'll never say, but to keep our nation safe today, dangerous games they go to play, and for that they go into harm's way. We're the men of the forward shadow. That's what I'm still about.
God bless you, brother.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Yep.
Thanks for your service. So, podcast is taking off. Everybody's watching it. I'm getting tons of emails. I'm getting tons of social media responses back and forth. And a lot of people want to know, how do we support this podcast? How do we get more content? How do we make sure that what drives this podcast? It's super simple. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Those algorithms help us out a lot and help us get feedback on what we got going on. Comment. The comment section should be totally out of control. It should be something that, we're just, it should be uncontrollable. The other thing is steal our material. Take our material, monetize it, make it your own. Do whatever you want. I don't care. Just tag us in it, give us credit, and we love it. We love it. We want you to see all this material, take all this material, use it for whatever you want. It's the internet. Hey, this is America. It's all supposed to be free for that, right? The other thing you can do also, if you own a small business or you just have word you want to get out, call us for advertising. As you'll hear on this podcast, you'll hear advertisers on there. We have advertising as well, and that really helps drive our podcast as well. And remember that every dollar from this podcast goes to support the Sheriff's Legacy Foundation, a local charity, a 501c3. Thank you, everybody, and God bless.